Okay, we'll make a start. Good evening, my name is Claire Gladright, Acting Mayor of Kingborough, and I'd like to welcome you all along to tonight's council meeting on Monday the 1st of December 2025. Welcome to those also in the public gallery. Could you please make sure that your mobile phones are turned onto silent? It's 5:30 p.m. and I now officially declare the meeting open. Council now operates under Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2025. Under these, I am required to advise you that an audio or audio-visual recording is being made of the meeting, and all persons attending the meeting are to be respectful and considerate towards other persons attending the meeting. And C, language and conduct at the meeting that could be perceived as offensive, defamatory or threatening to a person attending the meeting or listening to the recording is not acceptable. The audio recording of council meetings is made publicly available on our website and meetings are live streamed on YouTube. I will now ask the staff to confirm that the audio recording has started. Thank you. I wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this land, the Muanina people, and pay respect to elders past and present, and acknowledge today's Tasmanian Aboriginal community, the Palawa Pakana. Attendees this evening, we have myself, Acting Mayor Councillor Gladright, Councillor Antoli, Councillor Bain, Councillor Cordova, Councillor Dean, Councillor Fox, Councillor Midgley, Councillor Richardson and Councillor Street. From our staff this evening, we have the Chief Executive Officer, Mr Dave Stewart, Director of People and Finance, Mr David Spinks, the Director of Governance, Recreation and Property Services, Mr Daniel Smee, the Director of Engineering Services, Mr Craig Mackey, Director, Environment, Development and Community Services, Ms Delise Shakuti, the Manager, Environmental Services, Ms Liz Quinn, Climate Change Advisor, Mr Padraig Pearce, our Consultant Planner, Ms Kate Heckelman, Communications Lead, Ms Sam Adams, and our Executive Assistant, Mrs Amanda Morton. Apologies this evening are from Mayor Councillor Reet. We're on page 1, confirmation of minutes. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please, that the minutes of the open session of Council meeting number 20 held on the 17th of November 2025 be confirmed as a true record. Move Councillor Fox. Looking for a seconder, please. Councillor Cordova. All those in favour? And against? Motion is carried. We're on page 2 now. Workshops held since the last council meeting. There were no workshops. Declarations of interest. Does any councillor have an interest they would like to declare? Councillor Dean.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. Declare interest in items 12.1 and 12.2, but I'll be staying in the room. Thank you.
Any other declarations of interest? No. Transfer of agenda items. Is there any item on the agenda that a councillor would like to transfer from open into closed session or closed into open session? No. Questions without notice from the public. Does any member of the public wish to ask a question without notice? Thank you. If you could please just state your name and your suburb.
Good afternoon. Tamika Adkins from Oyster Cove. So, given the community's interested in timely housing delivery and transparent planning practices, I have some questions around DA timeframes and RFIs. So, Kingborough Council has not been the primary cause of Tasmania's housing delays, but its rezoning choices, SAPs, restrictive overlays and shift towards lower density zoning have nonetheless added to complexity and uncertainty in the community. How does the council justify these planning decisions in the context of a statewide housing shortage when other councils are zoning up to increase the supply?
Mr Stewart.
Thanks for the question, and there might be the opportunity for the Director of Environment, Development and Community Services to add to my answer. I guess it's a wicked problem that we've got around housing in the state. We know there are significant shortfalls of housing around the place. In fact, as one of the priorities within the Greater Hobart Partnership, working with the other councils that we have within the Greater Hobart region, we are looking at how we manage and advocate for acceleration and greater density housing to be able to achieve greater housing supply and appropriate urban design that maximises that. I guess the question comes to not everywhere is going to be the place for greater levels of density, and looking at how we balance housing across our municipal area and making sure that the appropriate development is done in the right place as well is a really critical element. So that's probably answered the question at a more strategic level, but Ms Shikuti might have an addition around the sort of planning process.
Thank you. Everybody hear me? No? Yes? Through you, Mayor. So in terms of the application of zones in the draft LPS, our officers have been following the guidance and guidelines issued by the State Planning Office and the Commission, as well as Stralis, the Southern Land Use Strategy, which we have been working very closely with the state government on having input into that, and as our CEO said, about where densification is appropriate in our municipality, and then planning for, I suppose, the correct zones to be applied in those areas identified.
Further questions?
So Kingborough Council consistently issue RFIs, often pushing applications into a lengthy discretionary process. While RFIs are a legitimate planning tool, their frequency in Kingborough has raised concerns. Is this just another tactic employed by Council because it simply does not have the resources to deal with its statutory planning requirements?
Through you, Acting Mayor. No, I don't believe so. While I don't undertake statutory assessments myself, I do review a lot, and I also review when we receive feedback or complaints in relation to particular applications. What I generally find is that when a request for information is sent, it is because information submitted is incomplete, and therefore has to have a reissuing of the RFI to request that information. Often some items are not provided at all in responses, which can reflect at times the time it takes for an applicant to gather that information, particularly if technical reports, etc., are required. So it's quite complex and it varies by application. In saying that, it is an area we would like to focus on, and we'll be looking at to see if we can be more efficient and ensure that we're not unnecessarily delaying the process.
I know that often the RFIs have been issued purely on planner's opinion, and it has been escalated to yourself and the CEO for turnover to the client's favour too. So I understand what you're saying. In the interest, I do have a further question. So in the interest of transparency and accountability around approvals, to better understand the impacts of RFIs on development timelines and to ensure sound governance and evidence-based decision-making in the planning process, can the Council provide statistics on the number of RFIs issued over the past 3 years, including the average time added to application process as a result? And what portion of permitted applications will move to discretionary so that the community can assess whether this practice is genuinely necessary for compliance or whether it functions as an administrative delay that slows housing delivery?
Ms Shikuti.
Through you, Acting Mayor. I will have to take that on notice. Reason being is that would be an incredibly complex task to do, so I'd have to go and review what would be involved to provide an answer.
Does anybody else have a question?
My name's Jason Andrew Smith. I'm a Palawa man living in the Huon Valley. Just excuse me because I'm a little bit nervous. This is the first time I've had to attend one of these meetings, and I'd rather not be here, to be honest. But there's a few things that have been brought to my attention. My first question is, when are we, as a council, going to start prioritising cultural burning? and focusing on land management around Indigenous knowledge to do with fire. I look around the room at this table and I've engaged in conversation with a couple of people here over 3 or 4 years ago. Once again, the same as when we do that acknowledgement of country, I didn't no disrespect when I say this, I think there's a lot of box ticking going on and there's not a lot of follow-up action. So the question is, when is Indigenous knowledge, Petrulanari, Fire Good, what I run? I've been doing this for 5 years around the valley now. I've run hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of workshops. Thousands of people have attended and now going home and putting the right fires back on their country. When are we going to get that support from Council?
Mr. Stewart.
Again, I might have the first crack at that and then pass across to one of my colleagues. So, firstly, I acknowledge the material benefit that comes with appropriate cultural or coal burning on land. You know, everything that I have been told in my time in Tasmania has been that it is the best way that we can be looking after both our land and also looking after our bushfire risk, so I acknowledge that. I also acknowledge that the time is now, or you know, it was in the past, but the time, if it's not in the past, then the time is now that we should be moving towards that more appropriate land management practice, both on council land, but also supporting it to happen on non-council land as well. So I acknowledge your point, but one of my colleagues might like to add in specifically where we are in this process.
Thank you. Yeah, I can add to that with some more detail around what we have achieved and what we are wanting to do. So you might be familiar that Council has an ongoing partnership with CTAC, and we have a trainee land management officer relationship with CTAC, and that's been absolutely fantastic to build our relationship with that particular organisation. There's, of course, other things we do with a range of First Nations organisations in Tasmania, but CTAC is the one that we do have that partnership with, which is we're also looking at land management partnerships with those with CTAC as well. So one thing that in terms of cultural burning, we're in the middle of negotiating a contract with CTAC to carry out cultural burning for us. But you're probably aware that council owns 3% of the land, a really small amount of land in this municipality. So we do absolutely want to move to cultural burning and have attended lots of training and understanding of that practice. But more importantly, I think the point would be to make much more impact would be to encourage others to be able to access cultural burning for their properties. So we could do that through advocacy as well as what we do on our own land.
Oh, and I certainly appreciate that, but I'd also like to say, where did that that groundswell for that to happen with CTAC? It come from me in the workshops that I ran, not only for CTAC but for the Kingborough Council. And I had a few people inside this council that looked me in the eye, that hugged me on a couple of those days and said they were going to support me and support Petrulanari. Why does it always have to be an Aboriginal organisation? Why can't it be an individual? I'm the one that's been out there for the fire. I laid the ground, you know. I was the one that created this. I was the one that brought the fire down to the valley 5 years ago and engaged with respectful landholders and whatever the other word, stakeholders that we use. But yet there's been no support for me, and it's as if because I'm focused on non-Aboriginal or landholders, I've been left out of the conversation. And
There was a question in there.
Well, I don't
so would
know.
you like Ms Quinn to answer that question before you go on?
I'm curious to know why it's been organisations and why no one's reached out. You know, we had a burn 3 years ago planned for Hawthorn Reserve up here on the top of the hill. 3 hours before that burn was supposed to go ahead, I get a phone call to say that because of insurance purposes, we've had to pull the pin. No one's followed up with me in conversation to include me in that conversation since. Okay. And I find that a little bit disrespectful.
Thank you. I have heard your question in there, so we'll ask for the answer to be given.
So for me to clarify what the question is then, was your question, why have you not been communicated with, engaged with? Is that? Yeah? Yep. Yep, great. I just want to make sure I'm going to answer your question. So I don't have a direct answer, Jason, as to why that was and what happened to the Hawthorn Reserve burn. The reason that and I guess it's not appropriate in this forum to talk about our procurement, given that we're in negotiation at the moment. So I'm really happy to have a conversation with you outside of a council meeting. But I guess what I would say is that council seeks to work with a range of Palawa people and organisations and absolutely does not want to offend or disengage. That is not our intent. It will never be our intent. Our intent is to work across a range of organisations, and our intent is to absolutely respect the knowledge of the Palawa people of Tasmania in cultural burning, because our objective is to have healthy land and healthy country, and using and sharing Palawa knowledge is absolutely critical in that. And so happy to continue the conversation with you about procurement matters as is appropriate outside of here. But I guess what I was saying around CTAC is that we have an ongoing relationship with them through our trainees. So I'm sorry if you feel that we haven't engaged with you, but I'm absolutely happy to pick that up again and meet with you to discuss that.
Thank you.
Try and be brief on the next one. So it's been brought to my attention. I don't understand all the jargon and all this land zoning and all these fancy names and that we're throwing around. But once again, we talk about closing the gap and we talk about treaty and truth-telling and engaging in First Nations people and bringing them to the table. But yet all these groups and all these landholders are being dictated to that they can't do this on their land, they can't cut this down or can't cut this down, from people that have had a Western interpretation on reading country. Okay, and when I get sent these emails with all this detailed stuff that the council's put out to them and the reasons behind it, that's not what country's saying. So once again, the question there is, why isn't Indigenous people like myself, who's a local, who's been busting my guts for the last 5 or 6 years in the community to do the right thing, being included in the conversation when it comes to decision making? I should be sitting at this table.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
The question, who would like to have a go at that one? Ms Shakudi.
Through you, Acting Mayor. It's a really good question that you raise. As the planning authority and the local government, and I understand that the language around the planning scheme and the introduction is technical and clinical, can feel clinical. Our position is that we are in is that we need to operate under the Act that applies to us in terms of introducing a new scheme. So that process is set out and that is what we follow. So drafting the scheme or the local provisions and then putting it on exhibition. So the exhibition was the point in the process where our whole community, landowners and community in general, could have a say and make a submission in relation to the proposed zoning. And then further to that, those who did make those submissions are then invited to talk with the Tasmanian Planning Commission at the hearings which are underway at the moment. So while there, I suppose, wasn't a specific outreach to different communities, there was a general public consultation. But I acknowledge your point.
Because I would have thought one of the first protocols would be to send an invitation out to people like myself to see what our voice is. And my biggest concern at the moment is you're making decisions for countries. I've got 2,500 generations of my family were decision makers on this country.
Mr Andrew Smith, I do just have to remind you this is question time.
Yep, okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you. Yep.
Thank you. Are there any further questions?
Thank you, Jason. Charlie Biggins, Leslie Vale. I have some questions following on from Jason and following on from Professor Michael Rowan's questions on notice. And your council officer's reply regarding cool burning and mechanical vegetation management, planning scheme exemptions. Why is so? There was a question from Michael Rowan and an answer from Nikki Denexter in tonight's agenda. So these questions are addressing that. Why is cultural burning given exemption under the prescribed burning clause of the Biodiversity Code overlay, but mechanical management of the same vegetation prior to conducting a cool burn is not interpreted as being part of the same prescribed burning exemption?
Through you, Acting Mayor, I'll have to take that on notice.
Why didn't the council officer also extend to Professor Rowan's question the provisions contained within the same Biodiversity Code exemptions for the clearing of previously cleared land by mechanical means?
Through you, Mayor, Acting Mayor, sorry. I'm unsure as to why Ms Denexter did not extend her answer, but I'll have to take that on notice.
We are seeing time and time again a deliberate application of professional bias in the implementation of the planning scheme. Why are our planning staff cherry-picking their way through discretionary interpretations of the Biodiversity Code exemptions to deliver an unworkable solution for landholders?
Through you, Acting Mayor, I don't accept that our planning staff are cherry-picking.
I just gave you an example of exactly that.
And I will have to go away and look at how that is being applied to determine if the rationale and validity of that question. However, what I will say is our planning staff are professional experts in their field and apply the scheme and its various rules as intended. Thank you.
That's my questions. Thank you very much.
Are there any further questions?
Karen Groves, Snug. Just need a breath, sorry. In the media, at meetings and after postponing TPC hearings, you've said you've listened to the community and their concerns around the proposed compulsory placement of their private properties in the landscape conservation zone. Your recent community update on the 25th of November stated that rather than an independent planning consultant, you had first appointed Jim Mulcahy, a well-known conservationist and advocate for the preservation of potential habitat. Don't you agree that this is a slap in the face to those families and shows you have neither listened to us nor stopped espousing environmental preservation values over those of land users against all directions of the TPC?
Mr Stewart.
Thanks for the question. I think we might be getting a couple of things overlapped here. So in that update that we sent out, we mentioned that we were in the process of appointing two different consultancies, one to oversee the process to reevaluate the allocation of the potential use of landscape conservation zone through the municipal area. The second part of it was to look at the specific area plans associated with Bruny Island and the Bonnet Hill areas. So those pieces of work are being contracted at the moment, and we should be able to announce the specific contractors that will do those two independent pieces of work in the next day or so. The other I guess consultant that you're referring to was in response to conversations we've had with the Planning Commission around expert opinion relating to things that relate to environmental issues. In conversations I've had with the Planning Commission, they suggested very strongly that we needed expert advice in that process. As part of the process that we went through with the notice of motion from Council that ultimately got passed to appoint independent consultants, it did talk about withdrawing staff from the process. So in order to do that, we had been filling that sort of expert input from within internally, and so we've withdrawn staff from that and got someone in the meantime to talk about those sort of issues. I think it's important to note that we don't conflate that independent advice that we need in the meantime with the ongoing review of the LCZ. They are quite a separate process, and this is a process to get us through the hearings in the intervening times. This individual that has been appointed had come to us well recommended by a number of people who have been through this process with the Planning Commission, and from the Commission themselves as an independent expert that could be highly credible in this environment.
So do you feel like that was quite a long answer? Thank you, Mr. Stewart.
That's fine.
Did you...
The community update was confusing because it said consultants, where the motion that was moved earlier this year was around one consultant. That's the confusion from my side of things. So I make that note. I still think I can follow in with my second question. So as an environmental expert, Jim Mulcahy is known for promoting the precautionary principle, which suggests we conserve flora that is not only confirmed habitat, but also hypothetically or potentially habitat. So while forcing landowners to keep every plant and tree just in case a rare bird might want to roost in it one day, 2 of my 3 very real stepchildren have flown away from Tasmania due to a lack of education, work and affordable housing. Considering that in 2021 the total terrestrial reserved area in Tasmania was already over 50%, why does this council compel us to conserve more potential habitat rather than supporting us to house and keep our families together in Tasmania when we have ample room to do so?
Mr. Stewart.
I'll just address the tail end of your previous question first. So the reason that there's 2 consultants rather than a singular consultant, it was a matter of timing. To move through this process as quickly as possible, Council has chosen to appoint 2 consultants to separate the work so that they can occur in parallel to stop dragging out this process as fast as possible while still getting a really quality result. To address the substantive part of your second question, the rationale for having a consultant that addresses the environmental issues relating to land is one of providing expert opinion within the hearings process. It's a component that we are requested to provide by the TPC, and it's not to attempt in any way to reserve land or anything of the sort. This is a statutory process that we're moving through, and it's about exposing as quality information as possibly can through the process. So I can understand that having family members move away from home and seek employment and housing and all those sort of things in other areas is a real social challenge that we have in our communities, and we need to be doing more to be providing quality and affordable housing, quality employment in our communities. They are all really important things, but they can't all be dealt with in singular isolated conversations around specific issues like land use, zoning and planning. It is part of the equation, but it's not all of the equation. So this is where Council needs to work with other layers of government, other agencies to make sure that we're addressing these wicked social challenges and making sure that we're providing a really livable community, for a livable environment for our communities to live in.
Further questions?
State Planning Scheme Clause 3.4.2 states that environmental overlays should be applied in accordance with contemporary scientific assessments, ensuring restrictions are only placed where significant confirmed environmental values exist. The Strellis, page 55, says that planning decisions that impact land use should balance conservation with community needs, avoiding restrictions based solely on hypothetical or potential environmental values. Your advisor's appointment does suggest that the Council will be speaking in direct contradiction to these guidelines. Don't you agree that this will potentially lead to further TPC directives, costing ratepayers more time and money?
Through you, Acting Mayor, these matters are to be put to the Commission for discussion and robust discussion of the technical information put forward. So it is probably not something we can or should be kind of trying to answer in a council meeting. And I don't want to preempt what Mr. Mulcahy will be putting forward as his technical opinion in the hearings either. What I will say is that both Council and the Commission will be obviously referring to the guidelines and Stralis in which you have just referenced in terms of decision making around how different overlays should or should not be applied.
Thank you.
Are there any further questions?
Jamie King, Blackmans Bay. Would Council or does Council think with consultants, directions from the TPC, the amount of people that turn up all the time to council meetings, that you guys have handled this process appropriately?
Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, thanks for the comment. Look, I think we've acknowledged multiple times that with the ability of retrospect and looking back, there's a number of things that we might have done differently through the process. Fully acknowledge that, and we will take these as learnings and a must do better situation for the council. We're here to serve our community. That is why we exist. That's not always doing exactly what our community asks, because there's always different perspectives that come from our community, but we are here to serve you, and so therefore we need to make sure we're doing things as efficiently, as effectively as possible. And obviously when we're doing rework, obviously when things are taking as long as this process is taking, it means that it's not as efficient as it could be. So I acknowledge your point, and I think we have said in the past that we've acknowledged that we could have done better than this process.
Further questions? No? Okay, we're on page 2, questions on notice from the public. So just a reminder, if you wish to submit a question on notice, you can do so by completing the relevant form on Council's website or by emailing kc@kingborough.tas.gov.au. We had 4 questions on notice from the public. The first one was consultation regarding the Bonnet Hill specific area plan from Mr. Brendan Charles and an officer's response from Adrienne Stander. The second question related to Code of Conduct complaint against former Mayor Dean Winter from Mr. Charlie Biggins and an officer's response from Dave Stewart. The third question was regarding cultural cool burns from Professor Michael Rowan, and there was an officer's response from Nikki Denexter. The last question was regarding LCZ applications from Mr. Professor Michael Rowan and an officer's response from Delise Shakuti. We're on page 4, questions without notice from councillors. Does any councillor wish to ask a question without notice? Councillor Antoli and then Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. My question is regarding the 4 units that we own on Bruny Island that we classify as, I suppose, affordable housing. A couple of residents have contacted me to say that the lawns around those units are, in their opinion, excessively high. And I'm wondering if we could get a comment from an officer as to looking into that or an opinion on that.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for bringing that to our attention. I'll get one of my staff to go and have a look at the lawns, and if they need attending to, we'll get it done.
Thank you. That's all from me.
Councillor Midgley.
Thank you. It's a busy time of year where, as a councillor, we attend lots of different community events, and I did over the weekend and to the art launch on Friday at Gordon. And often when I'm at these events, I have community members telling me great things they enjoy about council activities and who can they send an email to. So I often direct them to that KC@Kingborough email, but I'm just wondering when we're out and about at community events if we can have sort of maybe some QR code feedback thing that they could perhaps scan and provide some feedback directly that way. So,
That's
but yeah, we had some
idea.
really great feedback about the walks that we do and the art events and the activities, and claiming they're, you know, so much better than other councils and how friendly they are and how friendly the staff are. So I thought it'd be great to pass that on to staff as well.
Mr. Stewart, did you want to note that down?
Yeah, thank you. We can look into how we can capture that feedback more effectively and make sure it's more accessible. And it's always great to get positive feedback as well. Our teams do some amazing work out there.
Does any other councillor wish to ask a question? No. We're on page 4, questions on notice from councillors. We had one question regarding feral cat management from Councillor Cordova, and there was an officer's response from Reen Reichart. So the open session now adjourns and the Planning Authority commences at 6:05 p.m. We're on page 6, officers' reports to the Planning Authority. Agenda item 12.1, PSA-2025-1, proposed amendment to the Kingborough Interim Planning Scheme 2015, site-specific qualification, additional discretionary uses at 124 Channel Highway, Taroona. There is a recommendation on page 25, and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Move Councillor Cordova, seconded Councillor Fox. Councillor Cordova.
So this is a site-specific qualification. The proposal relates to basically a change in the planning rules for 124 Channel Highway, Taroona, and these would be extra discretionary uses, meaning that council, after looking at them again, will then have the opportunity to look at the details and look at the public comments and make a decision then. So this isn't a recommendation for a particular building or design, but it is a recommendation for a new rule to allow this particular site to function in the context of a medical facility. So basically the site itself was formerly used as a church, as many people know, for over 70 years. It contains an existing building, driveway and car parking. This is the beginning of a planning scheme amendment process, so this is just the first stage before we go to public exhibition. The public exhibition will take place over the course of 28 days if this proposal is successfully moved tonight, and that public consultation will include, over the course of the minimum period of 28 days, the proposal is to publish it on the Kingborough Council website, twice in a newspaper circulating in the area, a site notice during the public exhibition period, and in writing to the owners and occupiers for the property and adjoining properties, as well as a full package of exhibition material displayed at the customer service area of the Civic Centre in Kingston. So we don't yet have the opportunity. This is basically the first step in the process. After this takes place, then it will go to public consultation and people will be able to take a look at what the proposal is, which relates to the changing of use from that site, which is currently a vacant building, no longer being used as a church, although it was for 70 years, a potential change of use of the site towards a medical facility. Thanks very much. I commend the motion.
Further contributions? Councillor Antoli.
Yes, I just have some questions for the relevant council officers. So obviously the request was a little bit more broad in terms of the zoning request than we had allowed. I'm just sort of wondering, when I look at what is not allowed, I'm just trying to understand what is so, and I believe the reasoning why we restricted it was that we wanted it to be more in harmony with the local residents and their needs. But when I look at the list of things that were disallowed, none of them, apart from maybe a cinema or a small theatre, is probably a bridge too far. Could I get a comment on why the added restrictions, why the need?
Eckelman.
I guess in terms of the need, or I guess the intention to reduce the types of uses that are allowed in terms of the overall breadth of things that are considered in that use class, there's, I guess, two elements. One, it's to ensure that the uses that do take place on that site are in line with the residential, intention of that site and of the broader area, and can kind of act in harmony with those. And the uses that are provided for are those that are kind of directly aligned with the proposed, or the uses that will be provided for in the low density residential zone under the new planning scheme. So there's a direct correlation there, and I guess an intention that when that scheme comes into effect, those are the types of uses and the categories of those uses that would be allowable within that zone at a discretionary level.
If I may ask a few more. Is that working? No. If I may ask a few more questions. So are cafes, restaurants, coffee shops, takeaway shops, bakeries, any those disallowed?
Under the current scheme, those are prohibited in the zone. Moving forward, those would be under the amendment allowed as a discretionary use.
Have they been allowed under this agreement?
Yes, just not with a drive-through, which is equivalent to now. So you can still have those uses as a discretionary use, just not where it's got a drive-through facility associated with it.
Thank you. This sound thing. Could you give me a bit of a off the top of your head list of the sort of things that have been requested that aren't allowed?
So I guess it's kind of narrowing the threshold of the uses. So the use classes that we've put forward in the recommendation are those that I guess align with the uses that are provided for under the new planning scheme. But I guess in terms of a business use, at the moment what is recommended is to tie to the same limitations of it just being for a local shop, I guess, which is something that's considered in terms of the drafting of the planning schemes and the construct of those zones, a use that is kind of acceptable in that residential setting. So it's, I guess, tying to a level of and a capacity of uses that are kind of within a framework that is already, I guess, in play.
Thank you. And would a chemist be allowed under the usage currently?
Under the current zoning in the planning scheme?
Yeah, under your recommendation, or the council's recommendation.
Not unless it was to be categorised as a local shop.
I'm sorry, the sound is not actually activating very fast. So what I'm trying to understand is, would in the original request a chemist be allowed?
As a general business use, potentially. However, I guess that part of the rationale for limiting the uses to what is, I guess, aligned with the uses in the low-density residential zone under the new scheme is to avoid any issues or points of contention with the nearby activity centre. So I guess I understand there's still work to be undertaken in the future in terms of that Taroona local centre and what that looks like in the future. But part of, I guess, the regional plan and what that tells us to look at is to ensure that activity centres and, I guess, business uses are kind of looked at in an area that might be kind of an activity centre and are consolidated where they can be, to avoid kind of having centres travelling along and, I guess, providing for uses that are outside of the centre. So, sorry. That was a bit random.
No, that's fine. And I certainly don't want any of my questioning to sound combative. I'm trying to explore what can be provided to maximise use to the local community. I don't live in the community, but I know it relatively well. Let's propose a medical centre or a doctor's surgery wants to set up, but they also want to co-locate a chemist on site, which is often a fantastic setup. Can this be done under the council's recommendations? And if it can't be done, what can you recommend we do to allow it to happen so that they work in sympathy with each other, and I would assume really benefit the local community?
Depending on the scale of the chemist or the facility that was provided for, I believe that there would potentially be capacity under the existing or under the medical centre facility for it to be considered an ancillary use. However, I guess that's something that would be dependent on the application that was made. And I guess part of the application that was made for the consideration of this planning scheme amendment also had a medical centre, I guess, component with it. So I guess that is obviously the intention of this site at this stage, but recognise that the chemist may fall outside of specifically as a standalone use what is currently proposed.
So definitely not thinking of it as a standalone use, and it's not my job to come up with a business plan for the applicant. I'm just trying to be a responsible part of the council to say it's often sought after. There aren't chemists in the area that I'm aware of. And it's and we can't get enough doctor surgeries in Tasmania. The more, the better, in some respect, as long as they can manage their business. So I'm wondering, I'd rather be able to see an opportunity for this business to really benefit the community by co-locating on site if it's their wish, giving them the freedom to maybe even go down this road, a chemist shop or a small chemist facility along with a potential doctor's surgery. Would that be possible under the recommendation we have before us? That's what I'm not clear on that.
I believe that if a chemist was to be categorised as a general retail and hire use, then that would not be provided for unless it was a local shop, which I don't think that a chemist would necessarily fall within.
Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
I have to say your name.
Yes, no, I got you.
Sorry.
And I'm not narcissistic enough to want you to say my name, but I'll wait for it nonetheless. I'd like to propose that we amend this so that a chemist or similar service can be offered in conjunction. And I'm wondering if I could get some advice on how that might be done.
Yeah, I think it would be good that we get some advice on that, because my understanding is we can only discuss what is actually being assessed here, and so you're trying to bring in something that hasn't even been proposed. So let's get some advice. Ms. Heckelman.
In terms of, I guess, the recommendation put to council, there are, I guess, the narrowing of the uses in terms of the use classes was a recommendation to council. So I'm not sure in terms of the process for council, but I guess there is, in terms of what was proposed initially, a general retail hire and use completely was provided for in the initial application. So I would assume that maybe leaves it open to council to be able to determine an alteration to the recommendation of council, but I'm not sure in terms of council processes how that works for the meeting.
And given we're in the planning authority as well, how does that work?
It does make it kind of a use that wouldn't normally be contemplated, I guess, in the residential zone under the new scheme that's to take effect. So it would be the only thing that would remain as a difference in the zoning under the new scheme. So I guess what had been put forward in this recommendation was that the uses that are going to be provided for under the SSQ are those which exist under the new planning scheme. So when that takes effect, assuming that it comes into effect first, that the SSQ would fall away and council wouldn't have to do any additional work to be able to continue on that planning scheme amendment, because it would fall entirely into line with what's expected and anticipated within that zone under the current scheme.
Could we get some advice, please?
Yeah, through you, Acting Mayor. So I think we've got a couple of options at this stage. We could potentially defer this decision in order to get further advice. However, I'd need to seek some comment from my colleagues about how that relates to statutory timeframes and being able to turn this around. The other option we'd have is to adjourn the meeting temporarily so that we could have a conversation about how we could potentially acknowledge Councillor Antoli's desire to change the recommendation on a way forward here. So there's a couple of options there if Councillor Antoli would like to proceed with an amendment to the recommended course of action.
So firstly, let's just find out the statutory timeframes. Is there enough time if we deferred this tonight to bring it back in a fortnight? Would it be a fortnight? Yep.
Through Acting Mayor, I actually don't know the answer right now. I think the best way forward would be to adjourn, to come back with some advice. It would also depend on, we'd also have to be consulting with the applicant as well in relation to this.
Okay, how do we need a mover and a seconder for an adjournment?
Can I speak to it first?
Sure.
Please. I don't want to see it slow down. So we have a business here that wants, we have a potential business here that would like to see a zoning change so that some material benefit can result to the community, and I don't want to slow down. So basically, as I'm hearing it, there's not enough current information to know in the room whether or not we can make an alteration or amendment to this recommendation here and now or vote towards it. We would have to adjourn either for 2 weeks or for a few moments to discuss. Is that what I'm hearing? Yes. I think I'd rather go for just a few moments, not weeks. I'm happy with that, but I don't know what the process is for that to happen. Do we have to vote on that? How does it work?
So we'll need a mover and a seconder for an adjournment. So move Councillor Cordover, seconded Councillor Fox. All those in favour? And against? So the adjournment has been granted. 5-10 minutes? Okay. Maybe we might ask for Ms Heckleman. Would you like to first just let us know what the amendment has changed to, please? Okay. Yeah, I was just wanting to find out what the amendment was and then ask for a mover and a seconder. Yeah, but first let's just find out what the amendment is. Or you... Okay. All right, Councillor Antoli, would you like to let us know what the amendment is, please?
Yes. Firstly, thank you to council staff for... I don't believe it's a waste of time. It's 15 minutes well spent that could actually add great value to the community. So this is going to be an additional clause with the wording as follows, but it has been handed to council. Amend the qualification under use table 12.2 in attachment 1, draft amendment PSA 2025-1 of the use class. Quote, general retail and hire to be only if for a local or a general retail and hire use associated with a medical centre where on land 124 Channel Highway, Taroona, and then the reference. And that's up on the screen. I'm happy for council officers to speak to it in terms of adding any clarity that's needed.
Okay, before we go on, do we have a seconder for the amendment? Someone to second it? Councillor Cordova as the seconder. Okay, who would like to make a contribution, or did you want to ask a question?
I'd like to make a contribution first of all.
Okay.
Okay, so we have later on in the agenda a request to potentially allow a medical facility here with 2 businesses on site, a GP and a pathology service. Wonderful. Down the line, if one of those businesses pulls out, you can't put a chemist in without this change. We've had that already established by council officers. The original request from the developer, who I've never met and have had no contact with from him, her or their associates whatsoever. So I'm doing this purely as what would I love to see in the local community if I lived there. Down the line, if one of those businesses pulls out, they can put in if the TPC allows this change, because it has to go through them, they can put in a chemist. Currently they can't. So that's all that this is, and I would really love to see my colleagues support that, because it will be of a material benefit to the local community, many of which are aged, and there are a number of old retirement, if I can put that, buildings or homes nearby, and it would be a great blessing for them to be able to walk to the local chemist, perhaps, rather than going the 6-minute drive down the road to Lower Sandy Bay, and they may not have their own vehicle to do so. And that is the whole logic of this interesting exercise we've gone through.
Okay, thank you for the contributions. Councillor Fox.
I guess I'm concerned about the fact that there is an area of land within walking distance of this particular site, which is, I understand, zoned for retail, and the potential of having a chemist there might actually be generated by having a doctor here. And I feel that there are rules that state, I think, that you're only allowed to have a chemist you're not allowed to have a chemist within 1 kilometre of another chemist. And that would mean that the currently zoned area that would be appropriate for a chemist would never be able to have a chemist. And I'd like to have some guidance from staff that I understand correctly.
Okay, so is your question... do you want to rephrase your question?
I want to rephrase the question that if we allow a chemist to be built here, does that preclude a chemist being built in a nearby commercial area?
Ms Heckleman.
In terms of a response, I'm not exactly sure in terms of the distance for chemists. I understand there are, outside of the planning framework, regulations around the proximity of chemists to one another. Any, I guess, application for a chemist would need to be considered from a planning perspective by council as a discretionary use. So I guess providing for that use on the site is not an automatic generation or an automatic approval of that use. You would still need to satisfy the planning scheme and I guess meet the other requirements of the scheme that would be in effect at the time to be able to provide that use on that site. It is possible, however, that the distance that the existing local business zone is in may, if it's within that kilometre radius and that is the cut-off, then that may preclude that use, potentially, yes.
It's only about
Councillor Fox.
down. Sorry. It's only about 5 doors down. It's where there used to be a grocery store and there's been a vet and all sorts of shops there in the past, but at the moment it's underutilised, and this decision we're making tonight might disadvantage that current commercial zone. That's what I'm concerned about. Thank you.
Thank you. Further contributions? Councillor Cordova.
I'll just briefly speak to this, Deputy Mayor, to say that, and I'm rapidly, racing through the pharmacy location rules from the Australian Government Department of Health and Aged Care. I don't have time on the fly to do that, but what I will say is, on balance, I think that we actually don't know if a proponent wants a chemist here or not. So even though it's a kind of nice to have, I don't think we can look at our crystal ball and say whether or not one would be there. Nor can we say the same for a potential application for a chemist at the existing area which is zoned appropriately. So on the basis of that, I think it's no bad thing one way or the other. My main concern is that we're... I haven't yet heard from staff whether or not there are any risks associated with this amendment. So I think my core concern is not... whether or not the chemist may or may not happen. I think you need a proponent to actually put forward an application for that specific use, and we haven't seen that. So all of that is a hypothetical, but what isn't a hypothetical is, will this amendment in any way create risk for council or risk for the proponent that we haven't yet discussed? Barring any unforeseen risks and so that is a question that I'd like answered, but if there are no risks, then I'm comfortable with this. So what are the risks?
Kuman.
So in the assessment that was put to council initially, we had taken the approach that the uses that were put forward, I guess, aligned with those uses that were anticipated in the low density residential zone. There is in the application materials, and I guess part of the justification of limiting and qualifying the uses was that there was limited material put forward in terms of justifying additional non-residential uses, other than that the site has been used for non-residential uses before and it already has a building there that would be kind of well suited to things that aren't residential and might not be provided for currently under the existing zoning. So I guess the intention of keeping the qualifications in line with the proposed TPS uses was to, I guess, minimise risk for council in terms of the process that will go before the TPC and conversations around whether or not there's an undermining of an activity centre which is in close proximity to the use. Or to the site, sorry, not the use.
Thank you. So through you, Deputy Mayor, that's the core risk, that we may inadvertently be undermining an activity centre that's already nearby, and that might have implications for the viability of that site. So by making this decision here in an area which is currently zoned low density residential, and we're making this little tweak in order to allow a medical facility, we may inadvertently be undermining the actual site that's already kind of zoned for it. So I think it is a tricky one, but on balance, I think I'm probably comfortable with it because it's a tricky one, isn't it? Look, at this stage, I'm interested to hear what other councillors will say about it, but I don't think the community will be particularly upset if a proposal. There is a difference between, I don't want to name particular brands, but you can imagine these big box store chemists, they look very different to what an unassuming medical facility will look like. If that's the case, that people are worried about traffic, noise, impact on neighbourhood amenity, intensification of use on that site, if people are concerned about that in the community, in the Taroona community, then they'll have the opportunity to write in during the public consultation phase, which will go for a minimum of 28 days. So I kind of feel like, on the fly, I don't know whether or not it's a good idea to allow for a chemist to be there or not. But if the community feels like it's a really bad idea, that they're happy to see a doctor's surgery but they're not happy to see a chemist, then they should make those feelings known during the public consultation period. So that's why I'm willing to let this go through now. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Just a question. Does this amendment have any impact on the next planning assessment that we're doing in relation to the medical facility, or I guess if a chemist was to be proposed, that would be a fresh planning application with traffic impact assessment done for that, etc.?
Yes. So in terms of the process of considering the next item on the agenda, it can only be considered, I guess, if council decide to resolve to undertake this amendment. However, if there was anything that was in addition to or separate to what is currently proposed in that application, it would have to be part of a separate and brand new application that required assessment against the provisions of the scheme in effect at the time.
Councillor Bain.
And just another question around, do we know the approximate timeframes of a process like this, as opposed to if the applicant waited till the Tas planning scheme came in and potentially achieve something very similar?
I guess in terms of timeframes and where things are at with the LPS process, it would effectively just be giving maybe a head start in terms of getting it done a little bit quicker, but whether or not, I guess I don't have a crystal ball in terms of which process will end up being quicker, because it still will need to go through as a planning scheme amendment process through that formal hearing process with the TPC. So it will still have the potential to have hearings and directions and things that may kind of take that process a little bit longer than it is statutorily prescribed at the shortest time as well. So it's really potentially just bringing forward something that, with the exception of the amendment, will be provided for under the new scheme.
Councillor Bain.
And just finally, anything we put in place here will carry forward in the statewide planning scheme when that comes into place?
So in terms of the the proposed amendment, so I guess what was in the agenda, that would effectively almost be replaced by the TPS, so there would be no need for council to do anything further, I don't think, in terms of that. In terms of considering the additional modification from this evening, that would then be something that the council would need to kind of package up as a request to the state to ask for that site-specific qualification to be carried forward into the new scheme, and there's kind of an administrative process set up to do that.
Further contributions from anybody? Councillor Dean.
Just a question. If this amendment isn't approved and the proponent would like to, or anyone in the future would like to undertake a chemist or pharmacist at this site, just what's the process should they wish to do so under the new scheme?
Ms Heckelman.
Under the new scheme, it would be still I guess a retail use that wasn't a shop would be prohibited, so you would be unable to apply for it. There is capacity in the planning framework for someone to lodge a planning scheme amendment to provide for that use as a kind of a site-specific qualification, so it could end up being kind of a similar process to this with alternate uses proposed, and then an application potentially as well.
Councillor Dean.
Yeah, and just another question. If it's approved, the amendment, there'll be an exhibition period. Will the Commission come back with recommendations, not just on the representations, but provide their advice? Because we've heard about the local business zone being a few hundred metres away, whether they then support this or not.
Ms Heckelman.
So as part of the process, the TPC will consider what is notified, so the amendment that goes on notification, as well as any representations that come in. But they will also, consider the legislative framework that is in place, and part of that, I guess, is the the Southern Region Land Use Strategy, which does have, I guess, provisions in it around activity centres and an activity centre hierarchy. But I guess the use that we're talking about introducing is not adding a whole ability for a giant shopping centre to be outside of a local business area in terms of the zoning. It is, I think, what we're talking about now, quite a specific and tied modification to allow for a use that would only be acceptable where there was a medical centre. So it's not something that, I guess there is still a risk of a potential conversation about the activity centre hierarchy and I guess the zoning of land and the intention of commercial and retail uses, but it's, I guess, in terms of risk, probably low.
Councillor Dean.
What I'm hearing is there's nothing really to be lost apart from it does feel a bit like we're making up the rules as we go in terms of just throwing in an extra what we might like, which makes me feel a little bit uncomfortable. But if it was so grossly unacceptable, the TPC would provide advice and say, look, this is given where we sit in terms of the zoning and what will be coming up under the Tasmanian planning scheme, we will receive advice back and we will have the ultimate decision at that point. Is that an accurate summation of?
Yes, that's correct.
Anything else further, Councillor Dean? No. Councillor Street.
Acting Mayor. I'll be brief. Look, I confess to being a little confused as to why we're amending this for a purpose that hasn't necessarily been requested by the applicant. But notwithstanding that, the amendment that's been put, I can certainly agree with, provided that the use is still associated with a medical centre. I think that's appropriate, the way that that's been put. The only further thing that I would say about it, just some mild concern, to go with my mild confusion, about the fact that the argument for it is the potential use of a chemist, or potential use as a chemist later on down the track. I just want to make clear that we don't have any control over that. Anybody listening shouldn't get their hopes up that that's a thing that will happen or is likely to happen. That's a question for the owner of the land, and yes, I think Councillor Antoli's amendment makes it potentially easier for that to occur in the future, but that's all that's happening here, nothing more. And on that basis, I certainly will support the amendment.
Thank you. Any further contributions on the amendment? No. If not, we'll move just the amendment now. So it was moved by Councillor Antoli, seconded by Councillor Cordova. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against. So the amendment has passed. So we're now back on the substantive. So further contributions or questions, please. Anyone? No. If not, I'll put the substantive motion, which is now up there on the screen. It was moved by Councillor Cordova, seconded by Councillor Fox. All in favour? Aye. And against? Motion is carried. So we're now on page 29, item 12.2. We're considering DA-2025-164 S34A development application for change of use, vacant building to medical centre associated with planning scheme amendment PSA 2025-1 for site-specific qualification additional discretionary uses. There's a recommendation on page 40 and I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please.
So moved.
Moved Councillor Cordova, seconded Councillor Midgley. Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So yeah, again, basically what's happening is that the council's being asked to formally change the planning scheme with this site-specific qualification to allow for different uses than were previously allowed in that area. So we're being asked to do that on the basis that, as you can see from the report, there's essentially a master plan, really. I forget the exact terminology, but they basically say this is all in one omnibus. They're asking for it's basically a background paper saying what the proposal is. It's a combined scheme amendment and permit application. And it includes all the design, all of the site maps there and also basically says why it's an appropriate and relevant site for a Taroona Medical Centre, for want of a better term. The proposal reuses the existing building and car park, mostly an internal makeover rather than a big new building, but it will, according to the proposal, allow for something like between 6 and 10 medical practitioners in the area. It mentions what the proposed hours and things like that might be. I think overall we can, just based on the conversation that we had on the previous item, we can, the mood of the room is that it's a good thing to have medical facilities that are close to the community, and particularly in Taroona, so that's no bad thing. The implications that need to be considered are things around traffic and parking and noise and neighbourhood impacts, and all of those will be made clear by the public consultation period. So with that said, I think I commend the motion.
Thank you. Further contributions? Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I also commend the motion. It's ironic that this place started out as a place that promoted the healing of souls, but it's now moved on to the healing of bodies. So I look forward to seeing it do that, and I'm happy to vote for it in its entirety.
Thank you. Further contributions? Councillor Midgley, then Richardson, then Bain.
Thank you. I'd just like to note that it's a really thorough report with a lot of information, and particularly the traffic impact assessment as well. That was really thorough and a lot of detail, so just to thank you for that information.
Thank you, Councillor Midgley. Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify, in the body of the report, it mentions that the application was for 5, I think, practitioners, and 2, I'm just trying to find it again, 5 practitioners, 2 administration staff and some cleaners. And then in the recommendations, we've put in there that they are to have no more than 6.
Ms. Heckelman.
Yes, so in terms of the scheme requirements for car parking, it's calculated based on healthcare providers or health services providers as opposed to doctors. So I guess that's accounting for 1 nurse and 5 medical practitioners on site.
Okay.
Councillor Richardson.
So that kind of leads nicely into the next question is, and I assume it's a prescriptive thing, right? So there's 29 car parks, I think, plus 2 disabled spots, plus a motorbike and 6 bikes for 5 practitioners. That seems like a lot of car parking for what is essentially 5 people providing services at any one time. Can you just unpack a little bit why that is so high?
Ms. Heckelman.
So the parking is really reflective in terms of what is currently there, is utilising the existing parking on site. The parking calculations that are considered in the planning scheme, I think, are a rate of 5 car parks per healthcare provider. So I guess that's the calculation that's set up and prescribed in the planning scheme. This application, I think, just sits one short of it, but I think in terms of looking at the traffic impact assessment and the information that's provided to consider vehicle movements, there is definitely capacity in the parking that's provided on the site and sufficient capacity for the use.
Councillor Richardson.
Sure. So I guess where my mind goes is there anything we could do, given there's a couple of extra consulting rooms by the look of it, and no doubt there's a shuffling of days between providers. Is there anything we can do to allow them to increase the number of healthcare providers with the existing, without having to increase the amount of car parking?
Through you, Acting Mayor, apologies, Kate, I've had to answer a similar question about a different clinic in our municipality. So that if the practice were to increase the number of health practitioners, that would be an intensification of use, and they would have to submit an application to us to do that. As part of that, they would be able to then submit traffic impact assessment, which could potentially demonstrate that the parking is sufficient on site, using data from the existing operation to predict that. So there is capacity for the owner and the applicant to be able to do that in the future. They would then have to go through an application for intensification.
Councillor Richardson.
Thank you. That answers the question. I mean, I understand we're bound by the rules. I think it's a shame that we're limiting it to the number that we are limiting it to, and I'm not a traffic management expert, but 29 for 5 seems high. But yeah, take your point that they can apply for a relaxation or whatever the technical term is later. So, thank you.
Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. My questions were actually along the same line as Councillor Richardson. Because I feel we are limiting it to 5 GPs and 1 nurse. Is that currently the case?
Ms. Shiguchi.
Through you, Acting Mayor. Yes, that's correct. So the assessment has been made on the application requested and materials requested. So we wouldn't be preempting further expansion or looking at parking requirements for something that hasn't been applied for.
Councillor Bain.
In the assessment they did, all the information they provided, did they put forward a case that they thought they covered off the whole 7 rooms in their traffic impact assessment?
Ms Heckelman.
The traffic impact assessment, I think, was based on the number of healthcare providers, because the parking calculations, I guess, are a little bit different to the use in itself. But there is, I think, some capacity for them to, in a traffic impact assessment, to consider the number of consulting rooms versus the number of employees. But I guess the base calculation that's set up in the planning scheme is based on the number of healthcare providers that are on site at the time in terms of meeting the acceptable solution for parking.
Councillor Bain.
So I guess in summary, the applicant's expectation is that they're only going to be able to have 6 medical professionals on there at any one time.
Ms Heckelman.
Yes, which is consistent with, I guess, what they've applied for in the application materials.
Any further contributions? Councillor Fox.
Just a typo on the top line of the motion, that if the planning authority resolves that, the resolves to initiate the amendment needs to be corrected. Thank you.
Councillor Fox. Any further contributions or questions? No, if not, I would ask Councillor Cordover if you'd like to sum up.
Thank you. Thank you to you, Acting Mayor. Yes, I think it is actually a good thing, and so I'd just like to briefly reflect in my summary what we're achieving here is we're opening the door, the pathway to begin for a Taroona medical development on a site that is currently vacant land. It's a vacant building. The building hasn't been used as a church for some years. So this is a really good outcome for the community. But also I just think I wanted to reflect on the conversation that we've had. It's very good, I think, that we're trying our best as a council to be permissive of or flexible around the use. But we also need to be careful about just assessing the proposals that are before us rather than, I mean, for all we know, yeah, maybe somebody one day wants a chemist or maybe somebody wants a merry-go-round, but they should actually apply for that and then we can assess it on its merits when it comes before us. So it's a similar story to the chemist and the parking. Yes, I hear the argument that maybe parking, maybe they should be allowed fewer parking spaces for how many medical practitioners they have. The reality is we just should wait for what the applicant actually requests and then make our judgments against what they're actually asking for rather than trying to throw everything in the kitchen sink in order to be flexible and permissible, as admirable as that is. Overall, I just want to finish by saying this is going to be a really good outcome for the community and we're always short of medical professionals and I think it's going to see good health and wellbeing outcomes. So I look forward to the next steps. Thank you.
Councillor Cordover. So I'll put the motion, it's printed up there on the screen. It was moved by Councillor Cordover, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, motion is carried unanimously. We're now on page 164. We're going to push ahead. 12.3, DA-2025-277, development application for AFL High Performance Training Centre at 10 Kingston View Drive and 7 Arralung Place and Gormley Drive, Kingston. There's a recommendation on page 188. I'm looking for a mover in Councillor Street and a seconder, please, in Councillor Dean. Councillor Street.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Gives me great pleasure to move this motion. It's always difficult when planning applications like this come before us not to reflect on the general merits of the application, and so I'll try to avoid doing that with this magnificently beneficial piece of development for the people of Kingborough and the people of Tasmania. It does, as the report sets out, comply with the terms of the planning scheme and the zoning within which it sits, and I think that the conditions that have been placed on the approval are appropriate in the circumstances. We did receive 8 representations in relation to the development application, all of which appropriately responded to in the report. Note some surprise that it was only 8 representations, given respectfully the controversial nature of some other development that's been conducted in relation to the Tasmanian Football Club. So I think that speaks to the way in which this development has landed in the municipality. I do have one query in relation to the representations, and that's in relation to the work that is or was proposed, and that's really my question in relation to 7 Arralung Drive. Is it the case that there's no longer any development proposed on that private residential lot?
Ms Heckelman.
Yes, that's correct. Through the process, it has been determined that there is actually no development required on that lot as part of this proposal.
And so, in those circumstances, any question as to whether there was notification given to the owner prior to the application being lodged is really irrelevant, because there's no work proposed on that lot any longer.
Yes, Mr. Corbyn. Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Acting Mayor. Look, that being the case, I'm prepared to commend the motion to my fellow councillors and for their hopeful approval.
Thank you. For my own contribution, I'm going to speak to the merits. This is a very exciting development for Kingborough, and I want to highlight just how much our community stands to gain from the AFL High Performance Centre. Economically, it will bring real benefits, more local jobs, a boost for our small businesses and stronger infrastructure investment as both government and private partners continue to support the precinct. Socially, it opens up opportunities that haven't existed before. Young Tasmanians will finally have a clear pathway to elite sport without leaving home. It will support healthier, more active lifestyles through community programs, and it will build a strong sense of pride as the Tasmanian Devils establish their home here in Kingborough. And in the long term, this development will attract families and workers, strengthening our region. It will put Kingborough firmly on the national sporting map, raising our profile and opening doors for future opportunities. For all these reasons, I strongly support this development. I also do not believe that the outcome of this week's stadium decision will halt the progress of the Devils. If the upper house rejects the stadium proposal, the AFL, in my opinion, will need to reconsider its arrangements.
Sorry, I'm calling a point of order in relation to that you're going to have to rule on in relation to your own speaking, but it's relevance to the motion before council. How is any of that in any way relevant to the motion before council?
I'm just speaking to the merits of the proposal.
It's a development application, Acting Mayor.
Okay. Right. Well, I will finish by saying that I commend the motion and I very much look forward to seeing this vision come to life for Kingborough and for Tasmania. Further contributions? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. A couple of questions. So I was pleased to see that the in relation to the TasWater, the sewer issue with that property, that the TasWater has since advised that it's no longer a requirement in this development. My first question is around traffic impact. So of the 8 representations, a number of them related to concern around traffic volumes, and particularly a very extensive and I think commendable in that it was so comprehensive, the I guess refutation of the traffic impact assessment, and it went something along the lines of how they actually expect that it's more like, I'll quote it directly, one of the extremely detailed representations lodged against this was that, and I'm going to quote from that representation, I attest that the above assumption of only 55% to 91% capacity during peak parking demands is categorically incorrect. On any given Saturday during the winter months, the existing car parking situation is dire, with countless vehicles parked informally around the precinct on grassed areas adjacent to Twin Ovals Road and the shoulder of Gormley Drive, causing serious safety concerns. In such circumstances, car parking capacity is more likely at 120% of formalised car parking, end quote. So that's a quote from one of the representations, and it was a very detailed, I thought, comprehensive quote, which I found quite compelling. Now, I do note that some of those concerns are addressed around peak periods in the officer's response. I just wanted to ask, is that quote that I just read a fair analysis of what's going on? In my personal experience, parking can be an issue there, and what comfort can be provided that this won't exacerbate an already existing issue with relation to parking?
Eckelman.
My understanding is that the traffic impact assessment, in terms of reconsidering the representation that was put forward, re-looked at the parking and concluded that it actually, in terms of the use that's proposed as a training facility, that the parking is sufficient for the use, noting that it's intended to capture the most frequent use, acknowledging that there will be kind of potentially short-term and ad hoc activities where there is greater parking demand, but that there are other avenues for council in being able to address kind of the parking for events and such on the site. And I guess left with the overall recommendation that the proposal provided sufficient parking for the use that's proposed.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you. Through you, Acting Mayor, I think it's still it's kind of an open question about the way I read it, including, I guess, the response to that criticism was essentially that, yes, at times where there's a lot of demand for parking, that it then becomes a question of traffic management and how do you deal with those peak periods, but one shouldn't try to have an oversupply of parking just for those, rare occasions when there's overlapping events going on. So I think that for me is still an open issue of contention. But I wanted to move now to the idea of bicycle parking and motorcycle parking, which isn't provided for, and just try and understand why that's permissible in this case.
I understand that in terms of the initial application that there aren't any proposals for that. However, as part of the recommendations for this decision, it is considered that it is appropriate that a level of parking, both bicycle and motorcycle parking, be provided and has been provided for in the conditions of the approval, as well as end-of-trip facilities associated with the bicycle parking, so the provision of that as well.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So for me, that's a real win to condition the permit such that it's a requirement, particularly around bicycle and end of trip facilities. what we want to do, I think, and this is just a more general comment, is encourage active transport for the people that are working there and using it for recreation. So I think that's a win. My next question is around landslip, and this is something that I kind of had to do a double take on. On page 212, it says in the box talking about landslip, I'll just quote the end of that. It says, therefore, any newly identified landslide hazard areas outside the planning scheme maps are beyond the scope of assessment. So basically, the way that I read it is that we have to assess the landslip against the mapping that already exists, and any landslips that are newly discovered that don't appear on the draft mapping, we don't actually have to assess. My hope is that the geotechnical report, which I haven't read in full, contains some assessment of the new landslip that was discovered. That's my assumption, but I'm asking for clarification around landslip. Essentially, I assume that the geotechnical report identifies this new landslip, which is mentioned in the report, and therefore has some risk treatments associated with it. That's my assumption, but I just wanted assurance that that's the case.
Ms Heckelman.
I'm just checking that provision.
Just further through you, Deputy Mayor, just while that's being checked, I guess I just want to expound on the issue just so people can follow along. Small areas of the subject land are located within a landslide hazard area, and it says in brackets low. So it's an assessment of low risk. So I don't want people to misconstrue what I'm saying is, there's a big landslip there. But it goes on to say a landslip hazard area low on the planning scheme. These areas are contained within the proposed balanced lot. It is acknowledged that landslide hazard data by Minerals Resources Tasmania shows more extensive areas of the site are subject to historic and active landslides. The geotechnical assessment by Geoenvironmental Solutions, dated 5th of June 2025, also confirms there is a newly identified active landslide hazard area on parts of the subject site, as well as an area of minor landslip on the fill batters of Oval 2. However, under the clause of the landslide hazard code, that clause only applies to development for building and works, subdivision or use of land for a vulnerable or hazardous use on land within a landslide hazard area. Under clause 3.3.1, a landslide hazard area is defined by the planning scheme maps. Therefore, any newly identified landslide hazard areas outside the planning scheme maps are beyond the scope of assessment, which basically means we don't have to consider it. And that's why I'm keen to know that somebody else will consider it to make sure that the batters of Oval 2 don't go somewhere that they shouldn't.
Ms Heckelman.
In just rereading this, I understand that the geotechnical report has considered those layers, and I also understand that part of the area that's identified is outside, I guess, the development area of this proposal, but because the application involves a subdivision of a much larger lot to create, I guess, a title for the new oval and, I guess, a road area, that it is kind of part of the overall consideration of the application. But I guess in terms of next steps, there is, I guess, further detailed design that would still go back to council in terms of assessment as part of the detailed design process.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you. Would it be appropriate, therefore, to condition the permit such that any of the recommendations contained within the geotechnical report must be adhered to? Like, that's one example off the top of my head of if it says we don't have to consider any new landslip that's discovered, wouldn't it be useful to amend the permit condition to say whatever the recommendations are of the geotechnical report, they must be adhered to in order to be compliant with the permit?
There is, in terms of the attachment of that report to the approval, potentially capacity to reflect that report. However, I guess if it's something that is outside of what council can assess in terms of a head of power, applying a condition may be problematic. Yeah.
that answers all my questions, and I appreciate the clarification there. All in all, I'm looking forward to hearing the contribution from my colleagues, but I wanted to acknowledge the real concern that that the representors had, but I do think that the fact that it was 8 rather than the hundreds that I expected, I think that is a bit of an indication that the silence here in relation to this does show that there's probably broad community support. Notwithstanding all of the political controversy around this topic in general, the economic and social uplift that will be provided by the investment in Kingborough is significant and not to be understated. And I also think that the broad community support that we're receiving so far leaves me in the position that I think that this is an appropriate contribution to the community. So I'll be voting in favour of this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Dean and then Councillor Antoli.
Thanks, Acting Mayor. Similar to my colleagues, I won't go on about the hydrogen benefits, but I will stick with the DA itself. A question just for me, which might not be completely common knowledge, is just around one of the conditions on page 189. It relates to like the hours of use of certain parts of the facility, and one which piqued my interest, which I hadn't heard a lot about, was the community use of a multi-purpose room and auditorium. The hours there obviously is set from 6 to 11, so just 2 questions. I can't see from the documents in front of us because it's obviously quite small in print, but just what those rooms might look like for community use, and were the hours just kind of replicable from what the Tigers and the Knights get to use for their, say, social events, etc.
Ms Heckelman.
I'm not aware of, I guess, the memorandum of understanding in terms of how those are used or how they may be used. In terms of the hours that are proposed, those are the hours, I guess, that were included in the application, so that's reflected in the condition, and I guess are similar to other operating hours that are kind of associated with the intended use.
Councillor Dean.
Sure, just to clarify though, that what does a multi-purpose room and auditorium actually look like in terms of this application?
There are, in terms of the proposal, some areas that of the site and the development that are, I guess, available or would be available for, I imagine, people to be able to hire out or to utilise for community activities or the like, in terms of club and social events. So it's not something that would need to be publicly accessible and would be up to the club to be able to, I guess, provide that as a function of the centre.
Mr Stewart.
Through you, Mayor, I'll just add to at this stage, and it is outside the scope of the DA process around exactly how the community is going to use this. The predominant use of this site is going to be for the high performance sport, the training and administration centre utilisation. There may be some community use, and indeed the club, who will be the owner and tenant of this the space, have been very positive about what their community engagement looks like. So that flows through from all sorts of things like cafe space and merchandise store through to running their Academy of Sport and Leadership that they are operating. But I guess the level of community use is outside of this process, is through the DA that we're looking to issue tonight.
Councillor Dean.
Thank you. I wasn't really actually getting to just the aspect of what the facilities actually are. They've been referred to as potentially being available. I appreciate that the Devils own the facility. It's completely up to them how they lease that out, but I just honestly haven't seen the DA to know, and was curious as to what those 2 rooms are, but I'll have to dig a little bit deeper myself another time. Just to sum up, obviously, I will obviously support this. In terms of the application, thank you to the officers who have put together a really thorough report, but I guess it helps being a sports precinct, and putting something like this in a sports precinct obviously makes a lot more sense than the previous site for the High Performance Centre, in my opinion, but also just noting what other councils have put forward in terms of the limited number of representations, I think is emblematic of this has community support, and I really look forward to it getting underway, and with all the associated infrastructure that comes with it, it's going to be fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dean. Further contributions, Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and I will take the advice of my colleague, Councillor Street, to make sure I don't make any statements that potentially may sound like I'm running for political office elsewhere. So my question is around the concept of spring
Clarify
farm.
on that, Councillor Antoli. You can speak to the merits of this proposal. The point of order was specifically to do with the stadium commentary, but you can certainly speak to the merits of this proposal.
I'll speak to the merits of it without wanting to sound political or making sure I'm connected to any people against the stadium, because I'm not. I have a question regarding the legitimate question around Spring Farm Road. Now, clearly that was very well articulated, but can Council provide an update on how that relates? What are we doing as a council, or what is happening with regards to the legitimate concern of Spring Farm Road and how it actually does impact, or the extension to Spring Farm Road does actually impact this site?
Mr. Stewart.
Thanks for the question. So the Spring Farm Road connection is outside the scope of this DA in front of you tonight, although it's referenced within the paperwork there to acknowledge the potential for its development in the future. As part of our agreements with the state government, it was always a separate package to that of the High Performance Centre itself that would be dealt with at a later stage. As part of the investigation that's been happening thus far around the broader precinct, some initial investigations around feasibility have been undertaken through that process, but at this stage it's too early to say the finer detail or at what point we will have a funding methodology put in place. But I again note that it's outside of the scope of this DA in front of you tonight.
Councillor Antoli.
So you're acknowledging that it is a concern of the community. It's not the scope of this developer to solve that problem, but Council is working on trying to solve that problem, is what you're trying to say?
Mr. Stewart. That's correct. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you. Look, I look forward to supporting this. It's transformative. All the superlatives could possibly be added, but it meets the planning scheme. I want to thank the Council's consultant and the council officers and the staff who've put together very thorough, and we have to be thorough for something of this significance. This is a generational improvement, and it goes so beautifully with all their neighbours next door, the Jack Jumpers, who are performing admirably, and I look forward to the Devils performing admirably too. Thank you.
Further contributions, Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I'll just echo what a lot of the previous speakers have already said, so just a couple of questions. In relation to the parking, in terms of the use of the parking, is that part of the DA, or is that a separate agreement as to if the public gets access to it or if it's specifically for this facility?
Ms Heckelman.
The planning approval is providing the 150 car parks, I guess, to be associated with this use. I guess it's up to... there is definitely, in terms of the consideration, the traffic impact assessment, consideration about where overflow parking may kind of be located, but that 150 car parks, I guess, are associated with the use that's been proposed here, in consideration with the broader precinct.
Thank you. And the 150 car parks are the two new car parks, and the existing car park is outside of that, is that correct?
Ms Heckelman.
Yes, I believe so, in terms of the numbers, yeah.
So essentially the existing car park, for what it's worth, will still be associated predominantly with the cricket oval?
Ms Heckelman.
Yes, I believe so. Yeah. Sorry.
Further contributions, Councillor Bain.
Yes, and just a question about stormwater. I'm not sure if it's a planning or an engineering type question, but I guess the detailed designs will come as the next step, but we know there's a fair few issues that come from the sporting precinct which flow down to like Gormley Drive and parts of Spring Farm. So would this be treated like on a precinct basis between this and the new oval development, etc., or is it sort of, are they going to be treated in isolation? Is my question.
Mr. Mackey.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Yes, there's a broader precinct stormwater strategy and plan that encompasses the whole precinct works, and that's that's being developed by our consulting engineers, but that includes the whole of scope, so Oval 3, Oval 4, the new TNA facility, Gormley Road, the soccer fields, and it starts to pick up some of the existing issues around O'Connor Drive and the top of Spring Farm Road as well, so it's a full precinct stormwater plan.
Further contributions, Councillor Bain.
Thank you. Only to say I'm fully supportive, and as previous speakers have said, I think the fact that there's only been 8 representations and pretty much all of those have been explained, I think it's a great result, and the community is going to be very appreciative.
Thank you. Councillor Fox.
Well, I'm fully supportive of the proposal. I'm just looking at page 190 where it refers to 64 trees being removed, and I was wondering whether these trees have any endangered species or threatened species or whatever qualities that might trigger an offset, and has an offset being considered.
Who wants to answer this one? Ms. Heckelman.
Oh, are you able to, or do you want me to?
I can.
Okay.
Thank you for the question. I understand that in terms of the environmental assessment that was provided with the application, that those 64 trees were identified as kind of a mix of native vegetation, but not ones that would necessitate the taking of an offset in terms of their removal. But there is, I think, a tree management plan that's proposed to be put in place to ensure that trees which were identified as significant in the report are preserved and kind of retained and protected as part of the development process.
Councillor Fox.
And will there be any trees planted to replace the trees that have been lost?
I am not aware of that. I'm sorry.
Councillor Fox.
Well, I guess I find that a bit disappointing because there's a large area of land that council owns around this property, and the trees provide shade and protection from the weather and the wind, and also habitat for native birds. Perhaps it's something that council could consider, or whether we could retrospectively ask that maybe there's some contribution towards planting.
There is a landscaping plan that does kind of sit with the application, so it is something in terms of coming back to council that will be required, I guess, to be looked at. In terms of the actual provision, I think it is in kind of accordance with the landscaping materials that were provided with the application.
Councillor Fox.
Well, that's my only concern. Other than that, I think this has been a huge project and a huge opportunity for this council, and I really congratulate the staff on the way they've handled it and managed the situation. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Further contributions from anyone? No. Councillor Street, would you like to sum up? No. In that case, I'll put the motion. It's up there on the screen. It was moved by Councillor Street, seconded by Councillor Dean. All those in favour, please say aye. And against. Motion is carried unanimously. That brings us to the end of the Planning Authority, which adjourns now, and the open session recommences at 7:35 p.m. I think we'll call a short adjournment, just a comfort break for 5-10 minutes, and we'll come back at about 1:45. Thank you. Okay, welcome back everybody. We're now on page 256, petitions still being actioned. There are no petitions still being actioned. Item 14, petitions received in the last period. We received a petition regarding curbside collection in Leslie Vale. There is a recommendation on page 256 and I'm looking for a mover in Councillor Fox and a seconder in Councillor Midgley. Councillor Fox.
It's my understanding that there is no discussion on petitions, just a matter of accepting them. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. In that case, I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Motion is carried unanimously. Page 256, Officers' Reports to Council. We're considering the 2025-26 Capital Works Budget Review. There is a recommendation on page 259. I'm looking for a mover in Councillor Antoli and a seconder in Councillor Bain. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So for anyone who's following along, good on you, you're a brave soul. This is a budget-neutral housekeeping item. There's no new spending is being requested, no additional funds are being allocated, and what we're doing is moving savings around from some projects to cover increased costs on other projects, with the net financial impact being zero, as I understand it. In short, the size of the capital program remains exactly the same. Some key highlights is that there'll be no increase to the total capital budget. Savings from completed or under-running projects are relocated responsibly. Some projects require modest increase to reflect real-world construction conditions. A small number of the projects are deferred for better design certainty. One new stormwater project responds to urgent erosion and flooding, and the overall program remains deliverable with a forecast completion rate of around 90%, which is, in my view, pretty high for local government. So I'd like to commend the engineering team and our new Director of Engineering, because I think he's delivered a process here that's transparent, it's disciplined, and it's clearly focused on community benefit. And I know the community appreciates that, because engineering and capital management is half of what we do. Savings have been identified early, they've been explained openly, and the team has redeployed to priority works, while overruns have been absorbed internally. An example of that being the Summerlees Road overpass, and I think that's a big win that we were able to actually absorb that internally, given that project. And I do commend bringing forward the Kingston Beach foreshore works to avoid, I believe, what we would call duplicated costs. That's a strong example of good operational judgment. And I like the professionalism this is showing, and I do want to commend our CFO and our CEO for keeping a watchful eye on the costs, which could so easily blow out in this part of what we do. And I'm really pleased to move this recommendation for everyone's input and consideration.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Further contributions? Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. My question is around the deferred projects, specifically the gross pollutant trap for the wetlands. So it appears here that there's $500,000. The installation of this new gross pollutant trap at the wetlands has been deferred to determine viability of a more cost-effective solution. Please may I have an update on that, specifically because I remember, if my memory serves me, a few years ago getting a workshop into stormwater management at the wetlands, and the idea, I thought, was to introduce a new best practice, new technology, some innovative solution, and I'm just wanting to know what's happening there, and are we moving to something that's more remedial rather than fancier?
Mr. Mackey.
Yeah, thank you. Good question. Myself and the engineering staff went down and looked at the situation in the wetlands. The scenario is that you've got a weir system set up there now, which predominantly during normal water flows stops any of the gross pollutants actually reporting down towards the river. You've also got a mesh graded system across the inlet leading into the wetlands, so none of the trash or larger objects can actually move into the wetland area. So it's really a choice for us whether we, whether we choose to clean out a gross pollutant trap on a frequent basis, or we choose to clean out the section before the weir. We think there's a more elegant design to be put in place for the overflow channel with some trash baskets. So when we get a large rain event and if we do get any trash reporting over the weir, we can actually capture those, and it's easy for our staff to access them and clean them out routinely. When we reassess the options with that, we'll obviously be involving the Environment Department and doing a thorough risk assessment to ensure whatever solution we put in place is valid and compliant.
Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Am I correct in thinking that this solution in the wetlands will also have an impact on dealing with stormwater runoff from Kingston Park, that it's one holistic system that is integrated, or are these, or is the gross pollutant trap in the wetlands has nothing to do with stormwater runoff through Kingston Park?
Mr. Mackey.
To the best of my knowledge, I believe that's two separate issues.
That's all. Just to say, in conclusion, that I think this is, I think it is a transparent way of dealing with the overs and unders. It's always comforting to see where the money has been. A project goes ahead and you always have a contingency amount of money there, and if you don't spend all of it, then that money can then get reallocated to other projects. So it's really good for the community, I think, to be able to see how those overs and unders work. I also think that just in terms of framing of the discussion, when we do infrastructure repair and maintenance, we're refreshing and renewing existing infrastructure, and also every now and again there's call for new infrastructure to go in. That's a net benefit for the community. That's always a good thing, and we wouldn't be doing our jobs if we let the infrastructure that we have degrade or fall into disrepair. So these investments, and I use that word deliberately, that it really is an investment rather than a cost. What we're doing is investing in the community and trying to meet community expectations. So I think that we shouldn't always think of this in terms of trying to get the cost, so to speak, as far down as possible, because if you think about in your own personal life, if you've got a car and you don't invest in maintaining that car, it's going to end up costing you a lot more in the long run, because you allow things to fall into disrepair, and then the cost of repairing them becomes more substantial. So prudent investment in a timely way across our municipality is a good thing, and that's the best way to manage our infrastructure. But I think the way that this report has been presented is good, and I appreciate the work that's gone into it from all the staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Further contributions? Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Yes, it's pleasing to see. I think there's over $600,000 of savings across those 7 projects mentioned, which have been reallocated elsewhere, so that's great. Just a question around the Browns Road project, that second stage. That's one that's been on the cards for quite a while now. So with this extra cash injection, are we expecting that to be wrapped up this financial year before 30th of June, do we think?
Very good question. We're currently working through the alternate traffic management plan with the Department of State Growth. We're at the point now where we're going to be submitting the traffic management plan and seeking to get a permit. As far as the additional costs go, it's regarding that traffic management. We need an on-ramp back onto the southern outlet, and we need to get a new revised tender price. So this is, a forecast of what we expect the cost to be. We won't truly know what that cost is until we get that revised tender process, but our objective is to start this work somewhere towards the end of February into early March.
Councillor Bain. Further contributions? No, in that case, Councillor Antoli, would you like to sum up? No. I'll put the motion then. It's printed up there on the screen. Moved by Councillor Antoli, seconded by Councillor Bain. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
And against, motion is carried unanimously. Page 264, petition, installation of footpaths and upgrades on Cleburne Street, Kingston. There's a recommendation on page 265. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Midgley, seconded Councillor Bain. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. The purpose of this report is to respond to a petition regarding the installation of a sealed footpath and the reseal and repair of curb and gutter on Claiborne Street in Kingston. So the 24 to the junction of Baranoa Road. There were 56 signatories regarding this, and the officers are going to do an inspection and implement maintenance works, and then advise the people who put in the petition. And then any capital proposals in regards to what the officers find out will be, I guess, considered in budget deliberations in the 5-year capital works plan. I just have a question in regards to that. Thanks for the information and the petitioners as well, because we know that having, active transport links and livability and walkability links are really important. It's a high traffic area, and people who live there know their local area and know the benefits of having better upgrades in that area as well. So I thank them for putting forward the petition. In regards to when the council staff do the review of the conditions of this, noting that we will advise the petitioners, how will we keep them sort of updated in regards to where that's going and what it looks going forward?
Mr Mackie.
Thank you for the question. We're in the process currently of developing our capital program for next year and then the subsequent years beyond that. As part of that development process, we'll go back to the petitioner and let them know where in the capital program we look to execute that work. We think it's reasonably likely it will be certainly within the 5-year capital program, given that there's road reseal works that need to be completed, and we're looking at the opportunity to join those works up.
Councillor Midgley.
Just one further question. I think we've done like a footpath audit across Kingborough. So this will, I guess, form, rather than if people put in petitions for all sorts of areas which there's a lot of community needs and upgrades, how do we kind of assess that among the whole kind of project of works?
Mr Mackie.
Thank you. This year we're actually introducing a prioritisation of our capital works, so we can actually assess all programs across all asset classes, to determine what investments we should be making in the near term. So that'll be in development, and that's basically where we're heading with that.
Councillor Midgley. Any further contributions? Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I do have some questions that may have been partially answered, so forgive me if I'm asking it again, but maybe I just need a bit more clarity. I have a question around this missing footpaths links register. So where does this link currently sit in the overall priority, given that it's already there and petitions have been thrown in? So that's part A, and part B is, do the petitions make any difference to its priority ranking?
Mr Mackie.
Good question. In terms of the missing link register, and again, what I was describing before is that we'll be working our way through that prioritisation against criteria, and that's around efficiency and the like. Do petitions make any difference? It may draw it to our attention, but not particularly. It's more with regards to its validity in terms of the prioritisation activity.
Thank you. You've mentioned in the report that a detailed review of pavement, curb and channel and footpath will now be undertaken. Is that part of this new prioritisation methodology you foreshadowed, or is that standard?
Mr Mackie.
Thank you. In this instance, it's part of our project initiation activity, so we will need to do a reseal there based on the condition of the road condition report that we received. So as part of that, we do a full and comprehensive scoping exercise to understand the full extent of works, not just on the road surface, but any, I guess, peripheral work that could be undertaken adjacent to the damaged road section.
Councillor Antoli.
So that's helpful. So does this engineering assessment provide, the information that this engineering assessment provides, is that provides new information that is currently not captured with the fact they're on the missing links register? Or is this just a sort of a standard asset condition survey?
Mr Mackey.
Yeah, so the condition survey I'm talking about is the IMG roads data, which is an autonomous camera that gives us back our condition. As part of that activity, once we get that data, is we go out to the road and actually do a site validation. And we don't just look at the road surface, we look at adjacent infrastructure as well. That might not have been picked up in that assessment.
And what communication feedback loop have we built to get back to the petitioners as to where this will be at through the process, so that we don't acknowledge with sweet words that we're considering it and then they don't hear from us for the next 5 years?
Thank you. I think that's a really good question. As part of the development of our new capital program processes that we're working on, we'll actually take that away and put that into our process as well.
Anything further, Councillor Antoli?
The final one is around safety risk. So you mentioned that there's going to you will do an immediate dispatch of some people to look at the road. Is that what I heard correctly?
No, we won't do an immediate dispatch to look at the condition of the road, but to look at the condition of the footpath to make sure that is safe.
Yeah. Councillor Antoli. Good clarification. So that will then hopefully prioritise the issue of safety risk and give you guys that quick analysis as to whether or not this should actually be prioritised on the to do with safety.
Mr Mackey.
Yeah, that's correct, but it's also to ascertain whether or not we need to do any immediate rectification maintenance.
Any further contributions? No. Councillor Midgley, would you like to sum up? No, I'll put the motion then. It's printed up there on the screen. Moved by Councillor Midgley, seconded by Councillor Bain. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against, motion is carried unanimously. We're on page 266, considering the dog management policy. There's a recommendation on page 269. I'm looking for a mover in Councillor Dean and a seconder in Councillor Midgley. Councillor Dean.
What we hear before us is an amendment or proposal for an amendment to our dog management policy. Hopefully not as controversial as previous iterations, but there is still an important consideration here, particularly in relation to the relocation of the dog obedience facility that is currently located on Gormley Drive, but due to the High Performance Centre will be needing a new home. Before us, if approved tonight, will initiate a process for the community to have their say over what appears to be two pretty good options. One will be tucked away in the Spring Farm development off Maddox Road, and the alternate option is down at Drew Point in Margate. Noting that the Drew Point location is the preferred option from the Obedience Club who have been engaged. So this is only just a matter of putting this out to the public and seeking feedback as to which of those two options are preferred from the community. So I'm happy to endorse and just finish with just the one question in relation to the Drew Point site. Can I just seek clarification, the state of this site? I assume it's owned by Tas Water, from what I can see there. The broader community interest or potential use for that site is what I want to ask. If it weren't to be a dog exercise area and Maddox Road was to be the location, what other potential uses are we closing off from ourselves or the community if we were to go for the Drew Point site?
Mr Smee.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Just to clarify, this isn't a choice. There's the Maddox Road site as an off-lead dog exercise area, and the Drew Point site is for the Obedience Club. So it's not one or the other. There are two separate proposed new declarations from Council in relation to its dog management policy. But just to answer the question in relation to the Drew Point site, it is currently owned by Tas Water. It's been on our radar now for at least 5 years. It's flagged in our Sport and Rec strategy that it's a strategic parcel of land that we should obtain tenure over. We have some approval for Taswater to proceed with the advertising process, but the actual negotiations with respect to whether it's a purchase or a lease will be ongoing and will be the subject of a future report. So tonight's report is purely about the process under the dog management policy.
Terrific. Thank you for the clarification. Just reading of the report, Mrs. Mead.
Councillor Midgley.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So it's just that pause, isn't it? It's like, take a breath. It's great that we've come up with a proposal and a solution and talking to our local dog user groups in regards to this. I'm just wondering, what sort of feedback have you had initially from the different dog user groups in Kingborough?
Certainly KDWA are really happy with the proposed Maddox Road solution. They attended our community forum on Thursday and voiced that publicly. Our engagement has primarily been with KDWA and the adjoining neighbours, as indicated in the report. The adjoining neighbours are supportive, and KDWA have had some liaison with their members, and on the whole are very happy with this proposal. In relation to the Obedience Club, certainly the committee that we have been working with are supportive of this, acknowledging that perhaps not every single one of their members is delighted about moving from the precinct down to Margate, but on the whole there is good support for both of these proposals.
Councillor Midgley.
Thank you. In regards to any works, remediation or site works or contamination or anything like that, has Council had to do any work in that regards? And if so, has there been any costs, and will there be any future costs, and will that cost Council, or is that part of this whole AFL precinct development budget?
Mr. Smee.
The development of both of the sites will be funded for as under the package. However, if there are the future ongoing operational management of these sites will be Council's responsibility. We have done testing in relation to the Drew Point site in relation to potential contamination, and that has cleared it for use for this purpose. So we don't envisage that that's going to come up as an issue in the future.
Councillor Midgley. Nothing further. Councillor Antoli and then Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I have two questions. The first is, I don't know if I've spotted a potential error, and if it has come up in some other question or conversation, forgive me, I haven't heard. On page 260, let me get this right. On page 268 at the top, the dog exercise area 3 does not seem to match what's in the report, which is page 5 of the report. There could be a superimposing error there, because on page 5 of the report, the actual dog exercise 3 area is all over the buildings. So I'm not too sure if that's an error in the... I'm not sure if it is an error at all, but it looks like it's an error.
Page, Councillor Antoli.
Okay, on page 268, the area shaded as dog exercise area 3 in blue does not match what's in the public consultation report on page 5 of that report, which is page 276 of our agenda. Or have I got that wrong?
I think what you're looking at is, I mean, certainly what's on page 268 is the actual area, and then in the consultation report, you're looking at a square with an arrow that refers to the general direction.
Councillor Antoli.
But it would be a transposition error between the two.
So is it an error, or are the two blue boxes on the two different pages correctly aligned? Because one is aligned over a building and the other one is aligned in the space behind the building, which is grass area.
It is an error.
It's a tree.
Okay, so I'll leave that to council officers to then fix up, so that putting out to the public what's correct. Yeah, thank you. The other question I had, is there seems to be a general increase and improvement in the total surface area that we're adding to our dog-loving community, of which I'm a member. Is that correct? So this seems to be an upgrade or a plus.
Mr. Smee.
It would be a slight increase, but I mean certainly the premise of what we have been working with both these groups is that they'll get a like-for-like replacement. So in terms of area, it's certainly no less, and I haven't done the sums, but I suspect it is slightly more.
Councillor Antoli.
I think just my general view is just the Drew Point piece. If you add that, seems substantial to me. But look, let's not argue on that. But I just thought I'd just bring it to the community. This is actually, yes, you lose where the dog training area is now in the sports precinct, but for the community, it just seems like an overall, from my point of view, a large increase in surface area available for dogs. So I just commend that to the council officers and say I think that's a great outcome.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I was going to say something similar, that congratulations to all the staff that have been working on this, because I guess one of the risks with the new high performance centre was the outcome for the existing users, and here we have 2 existing users and all the feedback so far has been positive, so I think it's a great result, so hats off to the staff. My second question was just going to be about timeframes. If the feedback all comes back positive and it looks like we're going to go ahead, have we got any timeframes on how much time it'll take to get these up to speed and how that relates to losing the existing facilities?
Mr. Smee.
The intent is certainly to have both these facilities in place before we have to remove the existing facilities within the precinct. So timeframes at this stage, we're working towards March of next year being the earliest that these would need to be in place, but obviously it's dependent on the tender processes and everything associated with them.
Councillor Bain. Any further contributions? Councillor Dean, would you like to sum up? No, I put the motion as printed on the screen. It was moved by Councillor Dean, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour, please say aye. And against, motion is carried unanimously. We're on page 283, the Coastal Hazards Policy. There's a recommendation on page 283. I'm looking for a mover in Councillor Cordover and a seconder in Councillor Midgley. Councillor Cordover.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. This is a really important one. So obviously the coastline of Kingborough is one of our greatest assets. It's one of the reasons why people love this area so much. It also is home to our amazing biodiversity, and there's important natural and cultural values across our coastline. So knowing that it's one of our great assets and knowing also that there's significant changes afoot, they're already taking place, whether you're at Snug Beach or whether you're at elsewhere throughout the municipality, there's lots of changes going on. And as we see more frequent and severe weather events that take place, this policy is central to that. And I have questions that I would like to ask, but before I do, I just want to draw everybody's attention to the guidelines here that Council's going to take a pathway approach to planning that will look at all options and identify thresholds and triggers for when new decisions will need to be made. A critical thing, I think, for the community to understand is when it comes to our coastline and the development that takes place on our coastline, we have coastal hazards, and they range from erosion and storm surge and impacts of flooding or saltwater encroachment. We need to make decisions around what happens to the existing built environment. Do we replace, do we stand our ground, do we fortify those areas with hard structures, with engineered solutions like seawalls and weirs, or do we use soft solutions like nature-based methods, sand ladders, geotextile and sandbags? And in some cases where there are buildings already do we retreat or do we hold the line? So that's some of the really important terminology that exists within this policy. And so I just wanted to invite, if I may, through you, Acting Mayor, council officers, to explain, really my question is, why is this so important? Why does it matter? And what are the significant changes that the community particularly should be aware of?
Mr Pearce.
As we see the increasing impacts of climate change on the coastal area, it's important that we do have that consistent approach to which options are available to us. So ensuring we prioritise the area that do have those high values for the options, as they do have impacts on other natural spaces. For example, a engineered solution in a seawall will damage potentially access to beach or cause sand scouring. So it's ensuring that we balance our approaches through that.
Thank you. And through you, Acting Mayor, when it comes to managing the buildings themselves, is it fair to say, really the question is, how are we supposed to manage our stakeholder relationships when it comes to, whether it's various sports clubs or whether it's people who have, some kind of boat infrastructure, residents on Bruny Island. How are we supposed to effectively communicate this policy around, particularly around the areas where we are going to choose not to hold the line?
Mr Pearce.
So through a number of case study sites we have that are experiencing increasing coastal hazards, so we have 3 townships that have been identified and communicated that they are experiencing greater impacts over time. It's communicating where loss acceptance may be appropriate, but where holding the line is more so. So the key piece for this policy is that it relates to council-owned and managed land, so it wouldn't relate to loss of any private residences, but it does assist us in making those decisions about what is the cost that we are facing. Are we continuing to rebuild in areas that we know are going to be at risk of future coastal hazards, or do we start to make strategic decisions about shifting to more protectable areas?
Cordova.
Thank you. Thanks for that answer. And through you, Acting Mayor, a critical area, I think, is for people to understand with us as we assess these issues as a council, the community. This is an invitation for the community to come on board with us as I want to reframe this debate to being about prudent fiscal management, because ultimately, if you keep throwing good money after bad, let's say that you're facing a rapidly changing coastline. So in the example of Snug, one part of the beach is moving outward and another part of the beach is moving inward, and that's just due to how the sand is moving. That will affect infrastructure that's along our coastline. And when it comes to making decisions as to whether we build in certain areas or whether we replace existing assets further back, those are decisions that we'll have to make in conversation with our community. But I think rather than thinking about this as a kind of, a pro-climate change or an anti-climate change action discussion, this really is a discussion about community safety and well-being and about infrastructure investment. It doesn't make sense to throw money at assets that are going to be stranded. It makes sense to invest prudently in areas where we know that we can have those assets sustainably. So I just wanted to, cast a fiscal responsibility lens over this discussion because it is critically important, and it's one of those really interesting areas where the rubber kind of hits the road in terms of the actual impacts that climate change is having on councils all around Australia. But here in Kingborough, we've got so much coastline that it affects us more, where if we're going to be good fiscal managers, we need to make sure that we are willing to make decisions around managed retreat, around avoidance of construction along areas of coastline that have already been designated as at high risk of coastal hazards, and where appropriate, infrastructure modification. And there will be some cases, like whether it's at Kingston Beach, we're seeing some soft solutions implemented. There will be occasions where we will have to have those discussions about how much money do we put towards hard infrastructure solutions like seawalls as opposed to soft infrastructure solutions like sandbags, or just letting the coastline change in a kind of more natural way. So it's a really interesting area. It's a really important area for fiscal management, and I commend the motion and I thank the staff once again for all their work on it.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Fox and then Councillor Antoli.
Yes, I've done the coastal management course twice, and I've been the local government representative on the coastal policy. And I realise that with coasts, where one person solidifies the position, someone else loses, basically. Or if you, for example, if a council were to build a dike somewhere, then it might create a gulch next door. And I'm concerned that I realise that what we're doing here is perfect, but what we're not doing on paper here is to advise local people who have assets like boat sheds, like the ones behind you on the picture in Conningham. They're probably not a good example because that's a hard surface, but in, for example, Bruny Island, where there are sandy areas, people consolidate their assets, but what happens is that the neighbour's shed will wash away because of the mobile landform, basically, that will erode where something else is being fortified. Are we in a position to advise and to assist people in the community with their private assets? This policy only deals with assets owned by council, but there are repercussions in whatever anybody does. And I'm just wondering, my question is council able to advise and assist and support or discourage the behaviour that has been happening on our coast?
Thank you. Really important question, and you're right, this coastal hazard policy does primarily look at council land and council assets and our own approach, but communicating these issues to the community is really important and very difficult at the same time, because loss acceptance is hard and change is hard, as we know. We've recently been successful in the last few weeks with a really sizable grant from the Disaster Recovery Fund, and that's going to be a statewide grant that LGAT will administer and will be on the working group. And there's three components to it. It's going to improve coastal hazards mapping across the state, and that'll really help us in Kingborough, where we've got some areas that aren't well mapped. And the second part of that is to work with the state government to produce guidelines for councils on how to talk to communities about coastal change, because we've started doing that. And so in our three coastal communities that are most at risk, Adventure Bay, Kingston Beach and Snug, as you would know, we've been talking to those communities. But it's really hard when local government comes along and says, this is our part, but what's the state's part and what's your part? And so I'm really looking forward to developing these guidelines with the state and being able to have those critical conversations together and being able to be clear with the community about what are the bits that we will assist with, where are state government's roles and where is that their own risk and liability. So that'll happen over the next 3 years. We'll develop the guidelines and then start implementing. But I'm not saying we're not going to start talking to the community before that. Obviously, at the moment, our focus is on Snug and talking to the Snug community about coastal hazards.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Further contributions. Councillor Antoli.
Yes, thank you. And I appreciate the previous question because it answered my question on what three communities are affected. So it's Adventure Bay, Kingston Beach and Snug. Is that right? Interesting. I'll need to dig deeper about why that is. The other question I have is, so as I understand it, the state owns from the shoreline into the sea and we manage from there inland. Is that right? Is that how the division of jurisdiction works?
Ms. Quinn. Yeah, thank you. It varies across the state, along the coastline. So, yeah. So, council mostly leases beaches from the Crown. So the Crown generally owns the land you're talking about, in that, you know, the foreshore, the sand and the water, and council has leases or licences, whichever one, on some of those most popular beaches. So we certainly don't have, so the ones we tend to manage are those ones where the population centres are. Yeah, so it's Kingston Beach and Taroona and Blackmans Bay Beach and, you know, parts of Snug. But our exposure is not the full coastline, and it varies. So that tenure can be seen on the list where it comes in and out. Sometimes it's Crown, sometimes it's council. Sometimes it's private, right down to the watermark.
Councillor Antoli.
That was that was interesting. I didn't know that. So is it, I can't use the word insurance, but what funds are available to us to support us in a coastal emergency, part A, and part B is, could we be unable to access those funds if our coastal hazard policy is not well thought through or not robust? Is that so? That A and B.
Ms. Quinn.
Thank you. Tricky question, to be honest, because I'm not completely sure. So in an emergency situation, okay, that's what you're talking about. So if there's a big storm surge or something and it rips out some of the foreshore. So generally there aren't funds for those sort of things. What there would be funds for is assets. So where we have assets like maybe public walkways, or you might have a surf life-saving club or something, or a toilet block, maybe toilet block's a good example. So often our assets that are in that really high-risk zone are low-cost assets. But there are some situations where we do have clubhouses, and but a lot of those are licensed to other people. So the Australian government and the state government have emergency response funds like they do in floods, and they would provide council, we could apply for those funds. But I can't think of an example where that has happened in recent times where we have applied for funds. We certainly do with floods, but coast is probably less sure. And that is the problem, I think, more generally in this coastal space, that there isn't clear policy positions between state, local and federal responsibilities for coastal management in Australia. It is a really difficult space.
So that again, that's helpful. I'm learning. I love it. So it's fair to say the policy's focus is around people, infrastructure that either we own or that supports our community. Is that fair to say?
I'd say that's fairly accurate. So it relates to assets that are built on council-owned or managed land. So there may be occasions where a boat shed is built on land that we manage, and so we have options to provide advice with how that is managed, whether it's going to increase the likelihood of coastal hazards, but primarily it's for those areas where we're looking at our assets in those spaces.
Councillor Antoli.
So if we had an unfortunate weather event, that's good, thank you, sorry. If we had an unfortunate weather event where there is a peninsula of our LGA where no one really lives and that has been damaged or destroyed by an event, we're not going to go in there and try and rectify it and put it back to its original state, are we?
So that'd be outside the intention of this policy. So the intention of this is preventative. So it is preparing for the resilience of those assets in the coastal areas as opposed to responding to damage from events.
Councillor Antoli.
No, that's fantastic, and I'm more than happy to support the policy. And I do appreciate answering those questions because I'm pretty plugged in and I learnt a lot. And, if we have a relatively low information individual out there that's really not plugged into this sort of stuff and not connected into council meetings, and this is the sort of thing that I like to put on my socials as well because it does educate our community.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Councillor Midgley.
Mayor, thank you to my council colleagues for the great questions. I've just got one question around, and the staff have highlighted this already, but since the development of the policy, what are some of the key highlights, I guess, since it's been implemented?
So this has been a year of embedding with this policy. So the Coastal Hazards Working Group was established to create these processes previously, and as of mid-year this year has begun assessing projects for their delivery. We've assessed approximately 20 projects, apologies off the top of my head, and they have come out at predominantly medium risk, some low risk, but they include the Tyndall Road repair to Tyndall Beach where landslip has impacted it, and various community hall or bathroom repairs or beach shelters that we're having conversations about. Where is the current inundation zone and is it currently impacted? And if the asset has a longer than 30-year lifespan, is it going to be impacted if we maintain it for another 30 years?
Councillor Midgley.
Thank you.
Any further contributions? No. Councillor Cordover, would you like to sum up? No, I'll put the motion then as printed up there on the screen. It was moved Councillor Cordover, seconded by Councillor Midgley. All those in favour, please say aye. And against? Motion is carried unanimously. We're now on page 296. There is a recommendation on page 297. We're considering the corporate credit card policy review. Looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Moved Councillor Bain, seconded Councillor Cordover. Councillor Bain.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So the purpose of this report is to consider the updated policy on the corporate credit cards. It looks like the main changes from the previous policy is we're allocating to positions within operations that have demonstrated an approved requirement for use. Instead of, I think the previous approach was more so allocating to senior positions on the assumption that they require purchasing card. So I think that's a great update, makes sense. The credit card allocation table is being reviewed annually instead of every 2 years. There's lots of details on the policy around credit card limits, what transactions are permitted, along with links to the relevant guidelines, such as the travel expense guidelines and the entertainment expense guidelines. So all in all, I'm happy to endorse the updated policy.
Councillor Fox.
I think just before I came to this meeting, there was an email that came out that was modifying this policy slightly, and I just want to be sure. I mean, we've got the written version in front of us, but I would like the staff to explain briefly what those modifications are that are not marked up on our papers.
Thank you. I understand they were just typos, but Mr. Spinks, would you like to clarify?
Yep, thank you. That's correct. So a little gremlin crept into the material that was distributed, so we just had some slight typos and grammatical errors just to fix up, but no change to the policy whatsoever in terms of what's in front of you.
Thank you. Councillor Cordover.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting Mayor. Quick question around the communications lead. So obviously, I assume the specific amounts of money have been chosen deliberately. So I don't mean to undermine that professional decision, but when we're running communications, do we use social media advertising as a strong component of our advertising? As a strong component of our engagement, and is $1,000 on the credit card enough to maintain really good? Like if we need, let's give a real example. Let's say we want to advertise on social media to make sure everybody knows about the dog engagement policy, and we really want to cross all our T's and dot all our I's, so that there has been some criticism, I think it's fair to say, levelled at council around whether we're engaging enough or whether enough people hear about, even when we publish things on the website and we publish them in the newspaper and we publish them here and there and everywhere. Surely if we were running like really concerted paid social media advertising campaigns, we'd be able to reach more people. And so my question is, are the amounts of money that are allocated to this credit card policy appropriate in order to undertake that specific operational function? Obviously, I recognise that the communications team will have a budget that they adhere to, but what I'm saying is when we do social media advertising, typically one needs a credit card in order to undertake that activity. So are the delegations sufficient?
Mr. Stewart.
Thanks for the question. So I've just had a chat with our communications lead to be able to answer to your question more thoroughly. The credit card is used for undertaking things like social media paid promotion of posts and things like that. However, she's just told me that $1,000 is plenty for the activity, and I'll also note that we do have the ability under the policy to top up credit cards if there needs to be more use, and there's a process through the policy to be able to do that. So I think it's an entirely appropriate level.
Further contributions? Councillor Bain, did you want to sum up? No, I'll put the motion as printed up there on the screen. All those in favour? Aye. And against? Motion is carried unanimously. We're on page 332. We're considering the Kingborough Bicycle Advisory Committee minutes for the 7th of November 2025. There is a recommendation on 333. Looking for a mover, Councillor Midgley, and a seconder, Councillor Fox. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you. As per policy or discussion we've had previously, that any letters that we write comes through as a motion. So in regards to this one, as it states there, at the KBAC committee move that Council write to the Minister for Transport regarding the status of the state's walk, wheel, ride strategy and ongoing active transport funding, noting the benefits previous state funding has provided to implement the Greater Hobart Cycling Plan. Included in that plan is many projects that have occurred across Kingborough, so it is really important that we note and we ask that this transport funding is continued. And the other part of this is that we have had a committee member leave and a new representative, and I'd like to thank Mr. David McQuillan as well for his time and effort and going on site and meeting with staff and providing some really valuable input as well. The second part of this is for Karen Camino, who attends actually the committee at the moment as a representative of the community, just for interest. She rides her granddaughter around the community, really active user of our local paths and trails, and it's part of moving that we nominate Karen to the committee. So they're the two parts of this report and motion before us tonight.
Thank you for the explanation, Councillor Midgley. Further contributions, Councillor Dean.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Just a question from me. There's an item on the agenda relating to, on 338 of our agenda, which relates to the Taroona Highway bike lane upgrades. I feel like that's been on the card since 2022, ever since I've been here. Can maybe the chair or staff give us an update as to where on earth that one's at? Because I feel like it's been deferred a few times.
Mr. Mackey.
Yeah, thank you. The bike lane project had to go for, what's the term for it? Forget the term for it. It's not helpful. Still not helpful. Yes. No, it isn't. Thank you. Had to get Crown consent. There we go. Thank you. And we're working our way through that process now. We've got some feedback back and we've had to do some slight modifications to the design around the stormwater joints. Once we get that back, it'll go in for DA with our aim to get that substantially complete this year.
Councillor Dean.
Great, and just so to clarify, there has been some on-road infrastructure put at some of the intersections, some green marking at various points. Is that a state growth initiative or has that been our expenditure?
Mr. Mackey.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. I'd have to take that on notice unless another officer has any information on it.
Councillor Dean.
I'll follow up with Councillor Midgley. I'm sure she'll know the answer at some point. It's not urgent. Thank you.
Further contributions, Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I didn't want to pass up the opportunity to echo the thanks that Councillor Midgley gave to the outgoing member of the Bicycle Advisory Committee, David McQuillan, and also to wholeheartely endorse Karen Camino as the new member as a replacement. I just think it's such a testament to our community and the people are willing to spend their time to help out to build a better and stronger community. It's really uplifting, and particularly I just wanted to mention that Karen is the most amazing volunteer. I see Karen volunteering at Parkrun all the time and among other things, and I just think it's so wonderful that people are donating their time to build the community, to strengthen the community and to give back. It's just it's really uplifting and it's really motivating, and it's one of those really good news stories that council can provide that platform to to allow people who have really good ideas and who are really inspired and interesting and have great things to contribute, to give them that platform to be able to contribute those ideas. And these will make long-term, like the work of the Bicycle Committee already has made an indelible impact on our tracks and trails and the way that we have active transport options throughout the municipality. It's actually building this community infrastructure that's helping keep us all healthier and improving our well-being. So as ever, we thank them wholeheartedly, and they're doing great work, and keep it up. And I'm very pleased to see Karen joining the committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cordova. Councillor Antoli.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, and Councillor Cordova did take some of the wind out of my sails. I want to thank David McQuillan, who's a personal friend of mine, for his lengthy service to the committee and actually to our community. He's a lovely chap, and I wish Karen all the very best and thank her for stepping up, because as Councillor Cordova said, without volunteers these committees fall apart, and we need the input so that we're providing solutions for the community that they want.
Thank you, Councillor Antoli. Further contributions? No. Councillor Midgley, would you like no summing up? I'll put the motion then. Recommendation on page 333. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. And against? Motion is carried unanimously. We're now on page 342. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please, to note the appendices. Move Councillor Midgley, seconded Councillor Bain. Are there any questions? There's some really great reports in the appendices. Councillor Midgley.
Thank you. Yes, there is some great reports. The first one is in regards to the CEO meeting, the one with Homes Tasmania regarding Huntingfield. If there could be any update on that, please.
Mr. Stewart.
So we obviously had a conversation with Homes Tas, sort of getting an update on where they were up to. We talked about a number of things like the road connection, the process to get that opened, and street lighting for that area. Also talked about what the process was around the land release. So really it was just an update conversation to making sure that we were staying plugged into the conversation and that we were supporting them wherever possible to move through that process to get the Huntingfield development underway.
Councillor Cordova and then Councillor Antoli. Oh, sorry, Councillor Midgley.
No worries. Thank you. So just, the Environmental Services report. I just note that staff have put a lot of time and effort into putting this one together, and there has been some really great outcomes. In regards to, sorry, I'm just finding my questions. So I'm just wondering if staff wanted to highlight, I guess, some of the biodiversity, the Biodiversity Highlight Award and the Natural Areas publication. I'm just wondering at all if staff would like to talk more about that Biodiversity Award or the Natural Areas publication, how that sort of came about.
Ms. Quinn.
Thank you, Councillor, for the question. Yes, so on page 4 you can see one of our staff members, Bridget Jupe, and the Deputy Mayor receiving an award with some of our local GPs and practitioners. So this is for our Dose of Nature program, which we didn't win the award. Unfortunately, we were runner-up, and apparently there were some incredible projects that were talked about on that night, who were also in that runners-up group. And so for us, Dose of Nature, as you probably know, has been running for quite a few years, and it's the only program that we know of that's being run in local government that's trying to blend a mix of well-being and connecting people to their local areas and the importance of nature in that, because we've got so many beautiful local patches that people can go to. So it's trying to introduce people who may not have been there before into that environment in a really safe way, and also while you're there, whether it's mindfulness or reflection. So those GPs, if you like, are prescribing nature to some of their patients and suggesting that they can come along to Council's program and participate as part of their mental health. So it's a fantastic program. It was great for it to be recognised. Yeah, we're really proud of it. And the other one was the Natural Areas publication. So this is appeared on our website. So it came from an idea of again trying to connect locals to their local patch. And so it's a guided. It's a bit like a guided walk, but really it's like a photo montage that you can use on your phone or you can download and print out, and it tells you about what are the local plants and animals in that patch and some of the features. So as you walk through that place, you could do it with a school group or any other group, or you can just do it on your own. Take that guide along and learn a bit about the plants that you're seeing in flower or whatever it might be. So yeah, just really trying to get people comfortable with visiting their local places and learning more about them.
Anything further, Councillor Midgley?
Just to thank you. And the feedback that I received on at an event on Friday was from a community member who was really grateful for the dose in nature. She could take her partner who had dementia. It was a really safe and welcoming environment. So, yeah, congratulations to staff on the award. If you could pass that on, please.
Thank you. Councillor Cordova.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. The Natural Areas and Biodiversity team, but also the entire Environmental Services report is it makes for a really brilliant reading. Over 12,000 native trees planted, hundreds upon hundreds of school children engaged in community participation, National Tree Day, all kinds of amazing things, and making a real impact. So once again, thank you. But I do have a specific question around the private water suppliers. So this is on page 360. Just a point of clarification, I guess. It says that only 2 of the 5 private water suppliers are tested by council, but the other 3 are tested by Department of Health. And I guess that has something to do with Department of Education, Children and Young People facilities, and a healthcare facility. So there's 2 schools and then a healthcare facility. I'm just wanting to ask why some of the water suppliers are tested by us and why the others are tested by Department of Health. And isn't it the case that if of the 5 suppliers they're getting 2 different types of assessment, are we not comparing like for like? Isn't there a chance of different results depending on who you get to do the testing rather than have the same agency do all the testing?
Thank you. Yes, good question. I can understand where you go. The testing is different depending on the use, so it's about the use. So council regulates private water supplies, for example, for tourism uses. Most of these are on Bruny Island, whether they're small cafes that are like based at Dens Point Hall is an example, where they're using a council facility but got a small cafe. So where that use is higher risk, and as you've identified, so that's either the school or the healthcare facility on Bruny Island, they're both regulated by the government, but they're testing for the same things. Yeah, and the samples are taken in a really consistent way. Yeah, there's a protocol for how you take those samples and how they get to the lab and how those reports are shared and things. So, yeah.
Anything further, Councillor Cordova?
Yes, please. Through you, Acting Mayor, one other question, this time about food safety. It says on the next page there, 361, that at current staffing levels there's not the capacity for the required level of food business inspections, although I do know that lots of inspections did take place. It goes on to say, and I quote, "To support this function, a casual environmental health officer was engaged between 1 July and 30 September to prioritise inspections of high-risk premises." My question is really, was that just a once-off, or is this a long-term systemic problem that we have? Do we need to up the resources in that area, or do we predict that? Yeah, was that just as a result of an anomaly, that it was a particularly busy time for some reason, or is this something that we actually need to invest more in?
Ms. Quinn.
Thank you. It's not an anomaly in that the number of food businesses are continuing to increase in Kingborough, which is a fantastic thing. So it means people are investing in Kingborough. And the reason we use it, but it is partly an anomaly because there were some changes in the environmental health team. So it's a really small team. They do an incredible job at prioritising their work. They have a lot of statutory responsibilities, as you can see by their report. And so what they are doing is prioritising the P1 or the highest risk food businesses, and that is what the state government asks us to do as a council. So it's not an anomaly, and yes, there is also always a reason for more resources in a department, but it's not a high risk in terms of it's not exposing council, to a statutory risk. It's something we are managing well through having the ability to have this casual officer come and assist us. Yeah.
Anything further?
Yes, please, through you, Acting Mayor. Questions now relate to the CEO's activities, if I may. A whole bunch of questions, actually. I'll try and be really quick. Is Huntingfield on track? There was a meeting on the 3rd of October with Homes Tasmania. Are there any updates that the public should be privy to?
Councillor Midgley did just ask that, but do you have anything further to add?
I guess it's not for me to comment for Homes Tasmania whether they're on track or off track in terms of their overall project delivery. That's a matter for them as an entity to talk about how they're going with the delivery of Huntingfield. I guess the key points of this are where our role intersects with them. So, for example, we've done the components that we require to open the street that goes through the subdivision, and then it's now for them to choose when they want to open that area. Additionally, we've issued the DAs for the subdivision for the phase one. So it was really talking to them about those points of contact and also just a check in for how they're going. So from my perspective, we've done what we need to for the next steps, and we'll continue to work with them over the overall development of the site, because it is going to be a large development that will occur over many years.
Over.
Acting Mayor, the question is now about a meeting with Mr Mervyn Reid in company with the Mayor on the 17th of November. Is there any... what was the purpose of those meetings?
Yeah, thank you. Mr Reid had a number of different points that he wanted to raise and opinions on how council is performing and the things that we need to be focusing on as an organisation. And he also had a specific issue that he wanted to bring up in relation to a roundabout.
Councillor Cordova.
Final question is just about the meeting with Adventure Patch, representatives from Adventure Patch. The questions around the provision of childcare in the municipality, is it sufficient, and was the meeting in relation to... Well, what was the meeting in relation to?
So it was a check-in, so they requested the meeting with me to talk about...
Check-in, not a chicken.
Oh.
A check-in, everybody.
Thank you for the interpretation.
Sorry, Dave.
We do love our Kiwi CEO.
I'm working on my vowels. So it was about the plans that Adventure Patch have for expansion, a new site that they've identified for that, and just a general conversation about how things are going. They are a provider, though, that has plans and aspirations for, I guess, increased service to our communities. So that's really positive. So talking to them about that and understanding what that is, and so wherever possible, we can be a part of that process with them.
Councillor Antoli and then Councillor Bain.
I'm not going to ask my question. I'm fine, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Bain.
Thank you. Yeah, just a very quick one. In regards to the Homes Tasmania and Huntingfield Road, is that solely a state government decision on when that opens, or do we have some say? And also, did they indicate any timeframes?
Stuart.
So the components that were required have now been done for the opening of that road. So things like the installation of street signage and those types of things is all complete now. So really that is now in their hands about when they choose to hand that over to council in terms of opening the road. So I imagine that'll be relatively imminent.
Councillor Bain. Any further questions? I'll put the motion, which is up there that the appendices attached to the agenda be received and noted. It was moved Councillor Midgley, seconded Councillor Bain. All those in favour? And against? Motion is carried unanimously. Everyone's getting tired. Page 342, there were no notices of motion. Item 17, confirmation of items to be dealt with in closed session. That in accordance with Regulation 17 of the Local Government Meeting Procedures Regulations 2025, Council, by absolute majority, move into closed session to consider the following items: confirmation of minutes, application of leave of absence, tender for replacement of 2 heavy tip trucks, provision of traffic management services. I'm looking for a mover and a seconder, please. Move Councillor Fox, seconded Councillor Bain. All those in favour? And against? Motion is carried unanimously. So in accordance with the Council meetings and Councillor workshops audio recording guidelines policy, recording of the open session of the meeting will now cease. So thank you very much to everybody who's been watching along at home. Open session.